In the waning years of the Ashikaga shogunate, Kyoto's grand palaces and hidden tea rooms reverberated with the whispers of a fading aristocracy. Within the silent corridors of one such mansion, a child was born under a pale moon, her wails echoing against polished cedar beams. She was the daughter of Sanjo Kanyori, a court noble whose lineage traced back to the Fujiwara clan, the power brokers of Heian-era Japan. From the moment she first opened her eyes, the world of Kyoto, wreathed in incense, poetry, and fragile courtly etiquette, would shape the woman who, decades later, would stand at the center of warrior politics and dynastic ambition. Her infancy passed beneath silken screens and beneath the watchful gaze of her wet nurse, who taught her the lullabies of the capital, lines from the Koken Wakashu and the names of the four seasons. In those earliest years, she learned the subtleties of refined speech and the art of composing a verse on a folded fan. But even as the court celebrated her birth, so rare and precious in an age of constant war, it was clear that the world beyond the palace gates was shifting. The provincial families, once content to serve the shogun at arm's length, had begun to assert their power. Samurai armies clashed across the provinces, merchants flourished in castle towns, and the ordinary villages, caught in the crossfire, endured famine, raids, and displacement. By the time the girl reached her 7th spring, shouts of battle had become as familiar to her ears as the soft rustle of silk. Yet within her father's compound, she remained cocooned in the world of courtly ritual. On auspicious days, she took part in tea ceremonies. On others, she practiced calligraphy in a wing suffused with pale light. She learned to walk with the slow, deliberate grace expected of a Sanjo lady, each footfall placed so that the hems of her robes never disturbed a single autumn leaf carried in by the wind. This training in restraint and precision would later serve her well, for she would need to move among warlords with equal poise. At age 12, she stood before her first mirror, adjusting the layered robes that would become her daily armor. The pale silk of her underkimono contrasted against the darker brocades of her outer garments, and her hair, pinned into elaborate loops, bore the weight of gilt hairpins shaped like cranes. She gazed at her reflection and, with the innocence of youth, wondered whether she would ever leave the peaceful confines of Kanyori's estate. Unbeknownst to her, the tide of history was about to sweep her far from the bamboo groves of Kyoto to the rugged mountains of Kai province. Meanwhile, in the land of Kai, beyond the peaks of the southern Alps, a young samurai named Takeda Harunobu was quietly consolidating his family's power. His father, Takeda Nobutora, ruled with a stern hand, yet his ambitions had awakened a fire in his son's heart. Harunobu, whose monastic name would later become Shingen, dreamed of forging a domain that would stand unchallenged among Japan's great warlords. As alliances shifted and battles raged, it became clear that political marriages, once the province of court nobles alone, held equal weight among military houses. The Takeda, seeking legitimacy in the eyes of Kyoto's imperial court, turned to the Sanjo family for such a tie. Behind this arrangement lay carefully exchanged letters scented with agarwood, carried by couriers who braved bandit-infested roads. Each missive spoke in measured flattery, praising the Sanjo's refined lineage and hinting at the Takeda's martial prowess. For the Sanjo, the union offered a direct channel to the new centers of power rising in the provinces. For the Takeda, it meant the prestige of tying one's name to the Fujiwara bloodline. In the autumn of 1533, when the moon was high and lanterns glowed beneath the harvested rice fields, Lady Sanjō, then scarcely 13, was escorted by her attendants toward the gates of a samurai residence she had never seen. As the procession wound its way through Kyoto's narrow streets, the young bride trembled at the unfamiliar sounds, clatter of hooves, warrior drums, the tang of smoke from forge fires. When she arrived at the Takeda estate, she found herself in a fortress of timber, a courtyard ringed by palisades, with banners bearing the red and black stripes of the Takeda clan snapping in the wind. The contrast with her father's mansion could not have been more stark. No silk streamers fluttered here, no courtiers bowed to her procession. Instead, a grim-faced retainer led her inside, where she saw men in iron helmets and mail cuisses, their expressions unreadable beneath lacquered masks. Yet the moment she entered the great hall, her senses seized by the scent of roasted fish and pine incense, she resolved to draw upon every lesson of her upbringing. She lowered her gaze respectfully, arranged her sleeves neatly before her, and offered the customary bows. When Takeda Harunobu himself appeared, his tall frame clad in the simple but immaculate attire of a warrior lord. There was a depth in his dark eyes that spoke of both power and curiosity. Their formal greetings were brief but laden with the weight of their worlds. She, a link to the imperial court; he, the rising tiger of Kai. Settling into her new home proved a trial. The courtly entertainments she had known, poetry gatherings, moon-viewing soirees, silk embroidery sessions were scarce in the rugged terrain of Kai. The seasons were harsher, bitter winds swept down from the mountains and snows blanketed the fortress in winter. Food was simpler. Millet congee instead of layered sushi, pickled vegetables instead of courtly sweets. Language, too, bore a provincial accent that she had to master lest her refined speech mark her as an outsider. Yet each challenge steeled her resolve. She studied the local dialect in stolen moments, gathered wildflowers to scent her living quarters, and presented handmade fans to the younger retainers. Through these gestures, she began to win a place in the household's heart. More importantly, Lady Sanjō recognized quickly that her role was not simply ornamental. While Takeda Harunobu read treatises on strategy and led patrols beyond the mountains, she managed the estate's finances, oversaw the training of her attendants, and collaborated with senior vassals to ensure grain stores remained ample through famine. Couriers arriving from Kyoto brought news of court intrigues, imperial edicts, and shifting allegiances. She translated those reports into actionable intelligence for Shingen, advising on when to press an attack or when to extend olive branches to warring neighbors. Though her title remained no kata, Lady of the Sanjo, in practice she functioned as a seasoned political operator. As years passed, the marriage bore fruit. In the spring of 1535, cherry blossoms unfurled like clouds across the sky, and Lady Sanjo gave birth to her first son within the sanctified walls of Takeda's castle clinic. The nurses swaddled the infant in crimson cloth, and the court priests performed prayers to secure his health and prowess. He was named Yoshinobu, a name invoking righteous faith, a hope that he would unite his father's martial spirit with his mother's refined wisdom. The birth elevated Lady Sanjo's standing. Mothers of firstborn sons in samurai families were accorded deep respect, and her counsel became increasingly sought on matters of succession and alliance building. Yet even as joy filled the new Mother's Days, undercurrents of tension rippled through the household. Nobutora, Shingen's father, still lingered in Kai, watching his son's marriage with both pride and suspicion. Other samurai houses eyeing Takeda's rise wondered whether the Sanjo connection made Shingen's clan too powerful, too cosmopolitan. And within Kyoto's gilded corridors, some courtiers whispered that the noble blood of the Fujiwara was being sullied by service to a mere provincial warlord. Lady Sanjo, despite her personal triumph, sensed that her greatest challenges lay ahead. Preserving her son's inheritance in a clan accustomed to intrigue, securing her own survival in a war-torn land, and balancing the delicate loyalty owed to the imperial court with the fierce ambitions of the Takeda. In the hush of early dawn, she often rose before the castle's stirrings. Standing upon a narrow balcony, she watched mist swirl around the gnarled pines, recalling the serenity of Kyoto's temple gardens. In those moments, she whispered prayers to the ancestors of the Sanjo and Takeda, vowing to guide her son through the storm. She allowed herself a single verse from the poets of old. Though petals fall on paths of war, a single bloom retains its grace. Amid the winds of iron and blood, the heart of beauty finds its place. Thus did the daughter of Kyoto, now a lordly matron in a land of swords and banners, steel herself for the decades to come. By cradle and counsel, by silk and strategy, Lady Sanjo had stepped from the palace hush into the whirlwind of Sengoku, Japan. Her story, born in privilege, matured in hardship, would shape not only her husband's destiny but the fate of an age. In the pale dawn light, the Takeda stronghold stirred to life. Couriers clattered down stone corridors, bearing scrolls sealed with crimson wax. Within her private chambers, where screens painted with autumnal maple leaves partitioned delicate alcoves, Lady Sanjo reviewed dispatches from Kyoto. Each note bore subtle suggestions for policy, imperial appointments in limbo, or hints of dissent among court nobles. To an untrained eye, they might appear as mere gossip, but she knew them for what they truly were. Tools to be wielded in the larger game of Sengoku politics. It was in the third year of Shoka, 1540, when the tension between father and son reached a critical peak. Takeda Nobutora, still shogunal governor of Kai by heredity, bristled at Harunobu's rising popularity among the vassals. Though Harunobu's mastery of cavalry tactics and logistical oversight, much of it organized at Lady Sanjo's council, had won early victories against neighboring clans. Nobutora viewed these triumphs as insolence. Rumors circulated that Nobutora planned to supplant his son by reinstating loyal retainers who felt the new lord's methods were too radical. Sensing the gathering storm, Lady Sanjo orchestrated a gathering under the pretense of a celebration of the cherry blossoms long past their season in Kyoto but still cherished. In the castle's central courtyard, petals imported and preserved in brine were scattered at dawn to simulate springtime, and bowls of plum wine were served to esteemed guests. Shingen arrived in full regalia. A crimson haori emblazoned with his tiger emblem, bearing his katana at his side. Nobutora, flanked by his men-at-arms, approached with a measured gait. As was tradition, Lady Sanjo rose to greet both men, her silk robes catching the early sun. She addressed each with equal deference, her father-in-law as the elder lord, her husband as the heir apparent. Then, with gentle firmness, she posed a single question. "Does the peace we honor today?" Her words, wrapped in courtly poise, struck at the heart of Nobutora's ambition. The older lord, after a moment's hesitation, nodded stiffly. In that gesture, Shingen read both acquiescence and a begrudging respect for his wife's diplomacy. That evening, beneath lantern light that threw dancing shadows across lacquered screens, Lady Sanjo and Harunobu convened with their closest advisors. She produced a map of Kai's valleys annotated with supply routes she had verified personally during winter scouting parties. She advised redirecting a spring levee to repair mountain passes, ensuring reinforcements could move swiftly. Harunobu listened intently, consulting the map as if it were a sacred text. "It is your foresight," he said quietly, reaching to touch her hand, "that keeps our armies fed and our people safe." Though unspoken, in that moment Lady Sanjo understood the delicate balance she maintained. Her influence thrived when her counsel was indispensable. Yet she could not appear to overshadow the warrior lord. Over the next decade, as Harunobu consolidated power, formally deposing Nobutora in 1541 and assuming the name Shingen, Lady Sanjo's position solidified. She managed the complex flow of tribute from vassal families, ensuring that rice, textiles, and armor forged by local smiths filled storehouses before winter snows set in. She also cultivated relationships with Kyoto courtiers, sending emissaries to secure titles for Shingen, the coveted appointment as Shugadai, deputy governor, of neighboring provinces. These honors, granted by a divided shogunate seeking stability in the east, bolstered the Takeda clan's legitimacy among other warlords. Yet her role extended beyond logistics and titles. A network of informants, consisting of lower-ranked court ladies and itinerant monks, fed her intelligence on shifting alliances in the imperial city. When a faction of the Hosokawa clan plotted to undermine Shingen's newly granted governorship of Suruga province, Lady Sanjo dispatched coded letters via trusted retainer Yamagata Masakage. Within weeks, Hosokawa envoys received veiled threats of retribution should they press their claim, enough to stall their maneuver until Shingen's generals could secure the region by force. Her mastery of intrigue earned her the epithet, the Silent Crane, among both Kyoto and Kai circles. Beautiful, serene, yet deadly in its precision. The courtiers wrote poems praising her grace. The samurai whispered of her acumen. Yet even as admiration grew, so did resentment among those who viewed a woman's influence as illegitimate in the brutal world of swords and spears. The birth of her second child in 1545, a daughter named Toi no Miko, Princess of the East, marked another turning point. With a son as heir and a daughter to marry into ally families, the Takeda line seemed secure. Lady Sanjo assumed responsibility for arranging Toi's marriage at the proper age, negotiating with neighboring clans to cement alliances. Yet finding a suitable match for a highborn samurai daughter proved more complex than any supply chain. The Ogasawara and Imagawa clans both vied for the union, each offering strategic advantages. In private councils, Lady Sanjo weighed the benefits. Ogasawara ties would strengthen northern borders, Imagawa would secure access to the Pacific coast. She ultimately chose the Imagawa, calculating that control of maritime trade routes could yield rice and salt to buffer against poor harvests. Beyond political marriages, Lady Sanjo also invested in cultural patronage, sponsoring no performances at the Takeda castle, The playwright Zimi's works, though originally conceived for Kyoto audiences, were adapted to praise the valor of Shingen's victories. In return, Shingen publicly and privately granted her protection for the resident actors, ensuring they traveled freely through Kai's territories. This patronage served a dual purpose. It showcased the Takeda clan's sophistication, and it allowed Lady Sanjō's agents to move under the innocent guise of touring troops gathering intelligence in distant strongholds. Yet not all of her efforts bore immediate fruit. In 1549, a devastating famine struck Kai when early frost ruined cherry crops and blight decimated barley. It fell to Lady Sanjō to rally relief efforts. She opened temple granaries, diverted funds from the clan's treasury, and arranged cross-border trade with Shinano province, even though it was governed by a rival warlord, Omura Nagatoki. Through back-channel negotiations, she secured wheat shipments sufficient to last through the next harvest. Her compassion won the loyalty of common villagers, many of whom later rallied to defend Takeda lands against enemy incursions. Throughout these years, Lady Sanjō maintained a private ritual of daily prayer at a small shrine built within the castle's walls. Each morning, before dawn, she knelt before an image of Kannon, the Bodhisattva of mercy, offering a single stem of white chrysanthemum. It was said among the attendants that, in those moments of silent devotion, she sought guidance for her family's destiny, her own sorrow betrayed only by the faintest glisten of tears. Her influence peaked in 1554, when Shingen prepared his first major campaign against the Imagawa at the Battle of Enshu. As banners were unfurled and drums beat fiercely on the plains of Tatami, Lady Sanjō remained in Kai, but her presence was felt. The logistics she orchestrated ensured that Shingen's vanguard arrived with ample provisions. Her diplomatic overtures kept potential adversaries neutral. After a decisive victory, soldiers returned singing her name in the same breath as their lords, crediting the Crane of Kai for their well-stocked banners. In the aftermath, Shingen rewarded her by building a small pavilion overlooking the valley, where she could meditate and write. From its sheltered veranda, she penned letters in elegant calligraphy and composed verses that spoke of devotion, duty, and the fragile beauty of life amidst the clangor of war. She titled one particularly poignant poem, "A lone blossom clings to a battered branch. Though petals fall, its fragrance lingers on. So too shall memory outlive the sword, and in quiet poetry our hearts find home." Dawn's pale light crept through the latticed shutters of Lady Sanjō's pavilion, painting the polished wooden floor in mottled patterns. She pressed her palms together and inhaled the cool mountain air, tasting its faint pine resin. Today, unlike any before, the winds carried a tension that prickled the skin. Takeda Shingen was preparing to march against Usuji Kenshin, his counterpart in Echigo province, in what would become the legendary campaigns at Kawanakajima. For years, Lady Sanjō had orchestrated every nuance of Takeda politics, the rice tariffs, the courier routes, discreet overtures to Kyoto courtiers, even the clandestine adoption of no troops as intelligence networks. Yet never before had her heart quivered so strongly. This war was different. It was a meeting of equals, a clash that would reshape the Sengoku landscape. More than once, she had consulted the shrine's oracle, seeking a sign whether victory or catastrophe lay ahead. The oracle's reply, inked on delicate paper, read only, "The crane soars at dawn, yet finds no rest on storm-tossed winds." She tucked the fortune into the sleeve of her robe, a silent reminder that fate, like politics, could not be bent without cost. Inside the castle's great hall, retainers and generals crowded around maps strewn across low tables. Shingen, resplendent in a coat of crimson lacquered armor, traced the Takeda front line with his fan. His voice, calm but steely, laid out the plan, a pincer movement to trap Kenshin's forces on the marshy plains near Kawanakajima's narrow defile. On his flank stood Takato Yuritsugu, soon to lead the cavalry charge. Opposite, Yamagata Masakage would hold the center. Yet each of these men relied on the unglamorous but vital supply chain that Lady Sanjō had so carefully assembled. Stepping forward, she placed a new chart before her husband. Mountain passes cleared of landslides, grain reserves tallied to the last koku, and secret stashes of raw silk for emergency ransoms. "My lord," she said softly, "the stores in the northern granary can sustain 40,000 troops for a fortnight. If we delay their advance by even a day, The harsh winds will ground their arquebus and erode their morale. Shingen looked at her with gratitude and a flicker of pride. Your wisdom outshines any oracular word, he replied. Yet, as he turned to rally his generals, she felt the familiar distance settle between the warrior's world and her own. Hers was influence wielded in shadows, while his would be carved in bloodied fields. When the banner roll call sounded, Lady Sanjō retreated to her inner quarters. Servants helped her remove the layers of brocade, revealing a simpler kimono adorned with the Sanjo crest. She took up brush and ink, beginning a letter to her son, Yoshinobu, then 17, eager to prove his valor. She wrote, My beloved son, though I will not see you on the field, my heart marches beside you. Remember that courage without wisdom is but a blade broken on stone. May the ancestors guide your steps. She folded the note and entrusted it to her maid, who would carry it to the young prince before dawn's first light. Outside, war drums thundered as the Takeda host set forth. Lady Sanjo watched from the battlements as column upon column of Ashigura spearmen, samurai cavalry, and supply wagons swayed down the mountain road. Each man carried in his heart the image of the tiger of Kai, but few knew how richly that tiger's strength was intertwined with the crane of Kyoto's council. For 2 days, the Takeda army advanced, skirting the foothills and fording swift rivers. On the eve of battle, Lady Sanjo convened her network once more. In a hidden chamber lit by oil lamps, she met with Kosaka Masanobu and Obu Toramesa, 2 retainers she trusted above all others. To them she entrusted further instructions: to secure hostages among local village leaders should the Yasuji press too close, and to maintain couriers along an alternate mountain pass in case the main road was cut. She provided each with folded maps and subtle warnings of ambush points she had learned from travelers to the north. Your discretion will save lives, she told them. Fail me, and the clan's glory will die on Kawanakajima's fields. They bowed, steel resolve in their eyes. The morning of engagement broke under a sky of shifting clouds. From her pavilion perch, Lady Sanjo glimpsed the banners of both armies stretched across the plain like imprisoned wings. To the west, Yasuji Kenshin's white-on-blue mon emerged. He rode a black stallion, spear raised, as if challenging heaven itself. Across the field, Shingen's cavalry gathered, their horses stamping the dew-soaked grass. The first clash, fast and furious, took place at the narrows by the Saigawa River where Masanobu held the pass. Kenshin's Ashigura surged, but disciplined Takeda pikemen checked their advance. Lady Sanjo watched as messengers arrived to report casualties, not few, but within expectations. She murmured a silent prayer, her thoughts drifting to Kyoto's lily ponds and the court she had left behind. By midday, the decisive moment loomed. Shingen dispatched Masaki's regiment across a hastily thrown pontoon bridge, seeking to flank the Yasuji center. But Kenshin, ever the strategist, anticipated the move. He led a personal charge across the waters. Legend holds he struck Shingen himself with his sword, though tempered armor saved the tiger's life. Chaos ensued. Lady Sanjo's heart thundered. She turned away, sealing her eyes against the brutality of close combat. Instead she prayed for Yoshinobu, who rode with the vanguard, and for her daughter's safety, though the girl remained far from these hills. When word came that the pontoon had been destroyed, marooning Masaki's troops on the wrong bank, she realized the Takeda pincer had nearly shattered. Yet Shingen, ever resourceful, had rallied reserves to plug the gap. As dusk fell, both armies pulled back, each claiming a form of victory. The fields ran red and the air smelled of blood and smoke. Lady Sanjo descended the mountain road with a small escort, arriving at the Takeda field encampment under a moon smeared with crimson. There she found Shingen seated on a folding stool, cleaning blades, his expression inscrutable. My lady, he greeted, rising. Though the day's fortunes were mixed, we hold our ground. She knelt beside him, laying her hand gently on his shoulder. And that is a victory few could claim, she replied. Rest now, for more trials await. Over the following weeks, Lady Sanjo oversaw the rotation of wounded soldiers to the clan's medical tents and organized makeshift field shrines to honor the fallen. She dispatched emissaries to local temples to distribute alms, securing prayers that she hoped would lift the warrior's spirits. In private, she wrote letters to Yasuji Kenshin's wife, the Lady of Ekigo, offering condolences and proposing a prisoner exchange. Though her overtures went unanswered, the gesture underscored her belief that mercy could temper the savagery of war. But within the Takeda camp, new troubles brewed. Young Yoshinobu, buoyed by his first taste of battle, chafed at his mother's gentle reproofs. He sought to strike deeper into Kenshin's territory, dreaming of glory, while Lady Sanjō cautioned caution. Their arguments, carried in the night by whispering retainers, grew sharper. She feared that unchecked ambition in her son could poison the unity she had so carefully nurtured. One moonless night, she found him alone by the riverbank, tossing pebbles into the dark water. "Mother," he said without looking up, "I must prove myself. Father's victories will not stand on my hesitation." She knelt beside him, her voice soft yet firm. "Courage is commendable, but haste breeds disaster. Remember, the greatest generals win with minds as calm as still water." He turned, meeting her gaze with a mixture of defiance and yearning. "I will heed you, mother, but only if you trust me." She closed her eyes, weighing her love against her duty. At last she placed her hand on his shoulder. "Then do this, ride with the council at first light. Show your mettle under watchful eyes and temper your steel with their wisdom." He bowed, the tension easing. In that moment, from mother to son, passed the silent code of the Sanjo. That power untempered leads to ruin. She rose, retreating into the shadows as he contemplated her counsel. As spring melted into summer, the Takeda forces withdrew to Kai to regroup. Lady Sanjō returned to her pavilion overlooking the valley, where she penned an official report on the campaign. She wrote of strategy and logistics, but also of the human cost. The bravery of foot soldiers, the stoicism of the wounded, and the grief of those who would never see home again. She argued for expanded winter quarters and improved field hospitals, pressing Shingen to institutionalize care for veterans. Shingen, reading her report in his private study, paused at one passage. Her plea that the clan remember the names of the anonymous warriors who lay in unmarked graves. "We shall erect a cairn in their honor," he murmured, sealing the pages with his signet ring. That monument, when built, would stand at the base of Mount Koshi, a testament to Lady Sanjo's compassion enduring beyond the clash of arms. Thus closed the first chapter of her life beyond Kyoto. A life forged in adversity and defined by the delicate interplay of courtly grace and wartime exigency. The daughter of imperial nobles had become the crane of Kai, a woman whose counsel shaped battles, who wove alliances with brush strokes of ink, and who stood as the unwavering center of a clan ruled by thunderous hooves and flashing blades. And yet, even as peace settled over the valleys, Lady Sanjō sensed that her greatest challenges remained ahead. Her son's ambition would deepen, rivalries with other clans would flare, and her husband's destiny, steeped in glory, would draw him ever closer to a fate no counsel could avert. In the quiet hush of her pavilion, she composed one final poem to seal the segment. A crane returns to its ancient nest, wings weary from the storms it braved. But in the hush of home's embrace, the heart must rise once more to soar. The spring rains had only just ceased when Lady Sanjō felt the first tremors of change beneath the surface of Kai province. The fresh green of budding leaves was tempered by the constant rumble of hooves on packed earth. Shingen's banners were unfurling once more, this time not toward Kawanakajima, but westward into the fertile plains of Shinano. Yet while her husband marshaled his armies, it was she who prepared the hidden groundwork, the alliances, the intelligence networks, and the unbreakable bonds of loyalty that would carry the Takeda clan to its zenith, or see it undone. As the daughter of Kyoto's highest court circles, Sanjo no Kata had always understood that war was not fought by swords alone. Now, with Shingen eyeing the strongholds of the Suwa and Murakami families, she set about weaving the complex tapestry of diplomacy. In the center of her chambers, laid out upon a low lacquered table, lay the first of many missives she would pen that season. A delicate poem to Princess Suwa, wife of Suwa Yorishige, framed as an exchange of shared appreciation for spring plum blossoms. Beneath the layer of courteous verse, concealed by subtlest shifts in meter, was an offer if the Suwa would cede their eastern pass without bloodshed. The Takeda would guarantee their lands and grant them honorific posts in Kai's new provincial administration. Such negotiations required patience. Messages sent by courier could be intercepted. Ink could be doctored, courtiers might betray her schemes. To guard against betrayal, she employed a network of female spies, ladies-in-waiting, traveling performers, and even Buddhist nuns, each sworn to secrecy. She arranged for them to attend poetry contests at Suwa's court on the high lakeshore, where they fed carefully calibrated rumors of Takeda generosity and implied the futility of resistance. Meanwhile, she dispatched a trusted retainer, Anayama Nobutada, disguised as a humble tea merchant, to assess the mood of local samurai and commoners alike. Within weeks, Lady Sanjō received a reply, a scroll sealed with the Suwa crest, its characters larger than customary, an early sign of desperation. Yorishige, it confessed, feared Shingen's might but loathed the idea of surrendering ancestral lands. He requested a personal meeting. Sensing both opportunity and risk, Sanjo no Kata arranged for the parley to take place at a neutral temple nestled in the foothills, far from Takeda walls yet still under her watchful gaze. On the day of the meeting, mist curled around moss-laden statues of Jizo, and the scent of incense mingled with pine. Lady Sanjō arrived with minimal entourage, just 2 samurai bodyguards and her personal secretary. Clad in simple robes embroidered with crane and bamboo motifs, she moved with quiet dignity, projecting the authority of Kyoto's aristocracy more than any warrior's helm. Suwa Yorishige emerged from the temple, armored, wary, clutching the hilt of his katana even as he offered a bow. Between them lay a small ceramic brazier, its coals glowing dull red, emblematic perhaps of the fragile trust they were forging. I have long admired the Suwa family's service to the shrines of Suwa Taisha, Lady Sanjō began, her voice soft as the breeze through cedar branches. Your stewardship of these sacred grounds is known from Ekigo to Mikawa. Her words evoked the religious bond that governed their province. She spoke of mutual respect, of shared guardianship over mountain passes vital to pilgrim traffic, and of the elder Fujiwara's vision of unity between court and provinces. As she spoke, she produced a sealed document, an official imperial edict obtained through her Kyoto connections granting Suwa Yorishige the expanded title of Protector of Shrine Lands under Takeda auspices, complete with the rights to collect certain tithes. Yorishige's eyes flicked to the scroll, then back to her. He measured his honor against the weight of her words. Finally, he extended his hand. In that clasp lay the silent conclusion of a bloodless bargain. The eastern gateway of Shinano would open to the Tiger of Kai without a sword drawn. Lady Sanjō inclined her head, and as their parties withdrew, she allowed herself a faint, triumphant smile. Yet her work was only beginning. Across the highlands, the Murakami clan, longtime rivals of the Suwa, watched these developments with dismay. Should Lady Sanjō secure Suwa's embrace, the Murakami lands would be exposed. Acting swiftly, she composed a second gambit, an invitation to Lady Murakami Teruko, styled as a joint celebration of the season's first harvest moon. The banquet, she proposed, would occur at Takeda's new hilltop estate, the Pavilion of Waxing Light, a fitting venue where her own poetry gatherings had already earned renown. Beneath the veneer of poetry recitals and rice cakes, she planned to offer Murakami the prospect of marriage alliances for her youngest son, thus binding them by ties stronger than rival claims. In parallel, Lady Sanjō mobilized her Buddhist collaborators. She sent offerings of sutra scrolls to the abbot of Zenkoji in Shinano province, along with a plea for prayers to pave the clan's expansions with karmic favor. Monks, in turn, preached sermons emphasizing harmony over conflict, subtly undermining local support for armed resistance. And through the no troops she had patronized, travelers carried her carefully chosen verses to every market town. Poems that praised the Takeda's benevolence, compared spring's renewal to the Takeda's unrivaled leadership, and highlighted the futility of defying a power blessed by both sword and sutra. By midsummer, the map of Shinano was shifting. The Suwa Eastern Pass was secure. Several minor clans sent envoys to pledge fealty. The Murakami, though reluctant, dispatched their heir to stay at Kai's castle as a hostage, in implicit acknowledgement of Takeda supremacy. In every case, it was not the blade but the pen that had prevailed. Guided by Lady Sanjo's deft hand, industrial forges in Kai ramped up production as vassal smiths answered Shingen's call. But it was the quiet diplomacy behind palace screens that ensured steel reached the front lines unimpeded. Amid these triumphs, however, new challenges emerged. Rumors spread of Oda Nobunaga's conquests in Mino province, his firearms volleying across battlefields with unprecedented devastation. The specter of matchlock rifles, a threat to the Takeda's famed cavalry, haunted Lady Sanjō's thoughts. She composed yet another dispatch, this time addressed to a craftsman-cum-merchant rumored to carry imported arquebus through Ise province. Inflowing ones and zeros of gold coins promised priority in Takeda markets. In return, she sought technical diagrams to improve armor plating and suggestions on dense formations to blunt musket fire. The merchant's reply, though cautious, revealed that several matchlocks had passed through Nagoya Castle, a direct path to Kai's southern border. Realizing the stakes, Lady Sanjō turned to her Kamakura contacts, retired court scholars who understood Western military treatises from Jesuit missionaries. In private gatherings masked as tea ceremonies, she and these Benedictine-trained monks pored over translated manuals, testing theoretical formations in shadowy courtyards with wooden mock-ups of infantry squares. These experiments presaged a future where the Takeda cavalry would charge not into spears alone, but into volleys of lead. Meanwhile, back in Kyoto, the imperial court itself drifted into deeper chaos. The shogunate's power waned as factions vied over succession. Lady Sanjō's father, Sanjo Kinyori, wrote of riots in the capital's markets and of the shogun's writ being openly defied by urban militias. Through urgent letters, she pressed for imperial decrees that would recognize Shingen's newly acquired Shinano governorship. In an act of rare boldness, she offered the shogun's regents a share of tribute from Kai's prosperous silk trade in exchange for confirmation of Takeda's titles. Though delayed by courtly inertia, the proposal eventually secured a fragmented imperial edict enough to silence murmurs of illegitimacy among other daimyo. Thus, by the autumn of the year of the Tiger, 1555, the tapestry Lady Sanjō had woven was complete. Shinano lay open to Takeda control. Suwa and Murakami stood bound by fealty and marriage. Matchlock intelligence flowed, and even the imperial court, reluctant though it was, had conceded her husband's rights. The Tiger of Kai now commanded territory that stretched from the windswept Kawanakajima plains to the cedar-shrouded lockshores of Suwa, all underpinned by the crane-like grace of his consort's diplomacy. Yet amidst these triumphs, Lady Sanjō sensed that her greatest test loomed on the horizon. For as Shingen's renown grew, so too did envy, and with it the shadow of betrayal. Her son Yoshinobu, now on the cusp of manhood, watched her successes with both pride and hunger. Could she restrain his ambition while safeguarding the clan's unity? And what of Oda Nobunaga, pressing southward with firearms and a vision of unification that heedless of courtly nuance? The answers lay ahead, in storms of steel and passion that would shake the foundations of every alliance she had so painstakingly crafted. As the leaves turned bronze beneath the harvest moon, Lady Sanjō retired to her pavilion one last time before the winter campaign. There, beneath papered screens depicting cranes in flight, she inscribed a single verse. Power blooms in colors bold, yet perishes when roots are torn. Hold firm the strands of mortal bonds, lest blossoms rise with petals shorn. Clutching her brush, she vowed, whatever storms may come, she would ensure that the crane of Kyoto remained the unseen heart of the Takeda's might. And with that promise, she prepared to guide her family through the crucible of winter, and into the legend that would bind their names across centuries. In the quiet hush of midwinter, when snow lay thick across Kai's mountain passes and the howl of wind through the pines seemed to carry distant echoes of clashing steel, Lady Sanjō toiled by the glow of her hearth. Outside, banners still snapped in the gale. Shingen's vanguard, newly returned from the southern campaigns, had claimed coveted passes and subdued rebellious villages. But their victories had come at the cost of frayed supply lines and many frostbitten toes. Drawn back into the relative warmth of her chambers, she pored over ledger books by candlelight, tallying losses and arranging the import of new horses from Ekigo. Each entry, each crossed-out figure, carried the weight of men's lives. When dawn's pale light crept through the latticed windows, she donned her fur-lined cloak and led a small retinue along the frozen road to the guardhouse at the foot of Castle Shingen. Here, she oversaw the distribution of winter rations, smoked fish, salted daikon, bundles of millet, and spoke with the Ishigaru on sentry duty. Their gratitude, earnest and unvarnished, warmed her more than any hearth. She listened as they told tales of distant kin left to endure worse cold in Shinano's border fortresses, and she made silent vows to ease their hardships come spring. Back in the main hall, Shingen sat before maps marked in deep red, debating strategy with his generals. Murmuring by the hearth, Lady Sanjō joined them unannounced, producing fresh intelligence. Word of an allied contingent from the Usuji marshalling near the Hirose shrine and reports of Oda Nobunaga's scouts probing the southern Nakasendo. The room fell silent as she recited her sources. A pair of traveling inkmakers who passed through Kyoto and the whispered assurances of a Jesuit brother she had covertly hosted during Hanazono's last tea ceremony. No warrior's boast could match the precision of her information, and Shingen nodded, eyes alight. In that glance she read both gratitude and the flicker of concern that would drive his next campaign. With spring's thaw came renewed activity. Lady Sanjō dispatched envoys to the provincial strongholds of Mino and Mikawa, offering trades of copper and lacquerware in exchange for peasant labor to rebuild collapsed fortifications at Iwamura Castle. She ordered the cloning of clay models depicting her crane motif onto tile roofing, both as an assertion of Takeda prestige and as a discreet marker for loyalist safehouses. She tightened the network of trained court ladies, each gifted in disguised courier work so that every district magistrate in Kai could be reached within 24 hours. Even the castle kitchens felt her hand. New recipes for preserved pickles and grain porridges were introduced, giving men on the march a taste of home even beyond the snow line. Yet not all of her schemes proved seamless. In the late spring, news came of a landslide that severed the Yamato River Bridge, an essential link to resupply Shingen's rearguard. Peasants stranded in villages on the wrong bank faced starvation. To avert disaster, Lady Sanjō negotiated a temporary pact with a neighboring Buddhist monastery. In exchange for donated silk offerings, the monks would lend their labor to rebuild a makeshift culvert. Within days, timber rafts and rope scaffolding formed a new crossing, and wagons laden with rice again rumbled into Kai. That quiet ingenuity, performed without fanfare, reminded senior vassals that the crane of Kyoto was as vital to the war effort as the tiger of Kai. As summer turned to autumn, Shingen prepared his troops for another thrust into Shinana, this time toward the rich plains near Matsumoto. Lady Sanjo's envoys had already sown seeds of discord among minor lords there, promising lenient treatment to any who would switch allegiance. Now she set her mind to preparing the Takeda families at home for a possible backlash should the campaign falter. She convened a council of clan elders, women and men alike, under the guise of a mid-autumn poetry recital. In flickering lantern light, she recited verses praising harmony and unity, then steered the conversation toward contingency plans. Fortified granaries, emergency furloughs for widows and orphans, and a new codex of clan law that would guarantee survivors half of any forfeited lands. The laws, drafted in her elegant hand, balanced stern penalties with promises of mercy, reflecting her firm belief that justice tempered with compassion forged loyalty stronger than iron. That winter, when Shingen's banners billowed northward beyond the old Wada Pass, Lady Sanjō remained in Kai once more. Her pregnant daughter-in-law, Lady Kogo, delivered a healthy son, Takeda Hidenabu, ensuring the second generation's continuity. The castle erupted in celebration. Drums beat, gongs rang, and a troupe of no-performers enacted a play celebrating the courage of a mother who saves her child from wolves. In the wings, Lady Sanjō watched, tears glistening beneath her composed mask. She saw in the infant's face the promise of a future she might never live to see, and she steeled herself for whatever came next. Early spring brought an alarming letter. Oda Nobunaga had seized Inabayama Castle in Mino, cutting off the southern approaches. His firearms rattled the nerves of even the hardiest Takeda veterans. Lady Sanjō reacted swiftly. She drafted a plea to Jesuit missionaries in Nagasaki to send more arquebusiers to Kai, promising land grants and silk stipends. Simultaneously, she ordered her own experiments in counterfire tactics, drilling a shigetu into wedge formations and reinforcing cavalry shields with interlocking wooden plates. At candlelit strategy sessions, she demonstrated diagrams of European pike-and-shot formations, astonishing generals more used to spear and bow. Though many within Shingen's circle scoffed at such novelties, they followed her lead, admitting that in a changing world, adaptability was essential. As the sun climbed high that spring, Shingen prepared to strike eastward once more, toward Usuji territory beyond the Chikuma River. Lady Sanjō penned a final counsel urging caution and patience, reminding him that Kenshin was as cunning as any daimyo. She enclosed a small token, a folded crane emblem carved from mother of pearl, a symbol she had worn since childhood. Her letter closed with a line from the Genji Monogatari, "Great tides prevail. Yet even the mightiest wave may find calm in hidden coves." Shingen received the gift in the privacy of his tent, his rough hands cradling the delicate emblem, and nodded, as if his wife's words provided both solace and wisdom. Thus did Lady Sanjō navigate the shifting currents of power. By living at once in two worlds, that of the warrior and the courtier, the strategist and the poet, she reinforced the foundations of her husband's rule while mothering the next generation, forging alliances both secular and sacred, and learning to wield new weapons of war and peace alike. Though banners would again snap on distant battlefields and snowdrifts would bury roads to the front, she remained the constant force at the clan's heart, shaping destinies in the silent hours before dawn. The year was 1558, and the chill of winter had barely released its grip upon Kai's high valleys when a new tension swept through the Takeda court. The once quiet corridors of Castle Shingen now hummed with whispered debates. Takeda Yoshinobu, the warlord's eldest son, was coming of age. Ever since the victory at Enshu and the conquest of Shinano, Yoshinobu had grown from a deferential youth into a keen strategist, eager to prove himself. Yet his ambition, untempered, risked unraveling the delicate balance that Lady Sanjō had so painstakingly wove between courtly lineage and martial dominion. In the inner chambers of her pavilion, Lady Sanjō watched her son train with sword and spear, his movements precise, his eyes shining with the promise of a future lord. She remembered the day he first strapped on armor as a boy of 13, his small frame trembling with excitement and fear. Now, at 23, he wielded his blade with the confident grace of a seasoned samurai. Yet each morning, as she administered healing salves to his old training wounds and oversaw the ritual offerings to Kannon at the miniature shrine she maintained there, she worried, would his steel outpace his wisdom? Her fears found validation in the council chambers one crisp morning in late spring. Shingen had summoned his principal advisors to discuss an impending campaign into Mino province, newly wrested by Oda Nobunaga's firearm-wielding legions. Yoshinobu arrived brimming with ideas, a swift cavalry strike through the mountain passes to cut off Nobunaga's supply lines, followed by a feint toward Gifu Castle that would compel the Oda to divide their forces. His youthful boldness drew admiring nods from the younger retainers, but old guard elder Anayama Nobutada, once Lady Sanjō's undercover envoy among rival lords, frowned deeply. "The passes are narrow and rife with ambush," Nobutada warned, "and Nobunaga's matchlocks prefer open ground." Yoshinobu's jaw tightened. "Then we shall force open fields of our choosing, senior. With enough shock from our cavalry, even arquebus volleys can be broken." At that moment, Lady Sanjō entered the chamber, her presence silencing the whispered objections. Clad in subdued robes threaded with silver cranes, she bore a rolled scroll of her own, detailed reconnaissance reports from her network of pilgrims and merchant spies, charting the lay of the land and pinpointing likely Portuguese arquebus positions. She spoke next, her voice soft yet carrying the authority of court and castle alike. "My lord, my son, the passes through the Hida Mountains can be secured with minimal losses if fortified palisades are erected on known choke points. I have arranged for supplies of salted horse meat and portable stoves to be lodged in hidden way stations. Further, I propose we neutralize enemy arquebus units by dispatching light cavalry to flare smoke pots and force them to reposition." Shingen studied her calmly. When he spoke, the council leaned forward. "Your strategy is sound. We will proceed on your counsel." Yoshinobu's eyes flicked to his mother with a flash of respect and envy. Even as he bowed, it was clear that Lady Sanjō's influence eclipsed his own. Within days, Lady Sanjō set her plan in motion. Under the guise of expanding the winter granaries, she oversaw the clandestine transport of timber and sharpened stakes to strategic ridges above the mountain passes. She commissioned artisans from Kyoto to carve elaborate crane motifs into the palisade gates, both as an emblem of Takeda power and as a silent signature that these strongpoints were hers. Meanwhile, her network of Buddhist nuns carried messages between detachments using suture-encased bamboo slips to conceal orders. As spring turned to early summer, banners of white and red marked the hidden way stations where cavalry and supply wagons awaited. In the castle's reception hall, Lady Sanjō trained a circle of junior officers in the new smoke flare tactics, using small braziers filled with damp straw to simulate battlefield conditions. Her halls echoed with the cracking of smoke and the sharp commands of warriors unaccustomed to such subterfuge. Across the border, Oda Nobunaga's scouts, led by the fierce retainer Kawajiri Hidataka, reported strange sightings of palisade-lined trails and smoke columns drifting along mountain ridges. Mistaking them at first for natural fog, they soon realized that Takeda was preparing in advance. When word reached Gifu Castle, Nobunaga himself tested the rumors by ordering a mounted reconnaissance probe, only to find his men driven back by agile Takeda horsemen wielding hooked polearms designed to unseat riders. It was on the morning of June 12, 1559, that Shingen launched the offensive. His banners swept through the foothills, flanked on both sides by hidden palisades and vigilant sentries. As cavalry thundered toward the Hida Pass, smoke bombs burst along the ridges, choking the Oda arquebusiers and forcing them to retreat from their high ground positions. Takeda pikemen, trained in pike-and-shot formations with minimal arquebus support as per Lady Sanjō's instructions, advanced steadily, securing the passes with only moderate losses. Within hours, Shingen's forces had overrun key supply depots, cutting off Nobunaga's southern thrust. A triumphant Shingen sent a messenger to Lady Sanjō. "Your designs have won this day. You are the true heart of our tiger's roar." She accepted his praise with a modest bow, her mind already shifting to the next steps. The resupply of her wounded son's unit, the fortification of Matsumoto's defenses, and the diplomatic overtures needed to prevent a coalition of border daimyo from uniting against Takeda's gains. Yet, as Takeda power expanded, the seeds of internal discord began to sprout. Yoshinobu, emboldened by his field command's success, grew more restive under his mother's gentle admonitions. He pressed for credit in proclamations to be reworded, for his own emblem to appear on official seals, and for a greater share of the clan's revenues. Lady Sanjō, recognizing the danger of unchecked ambition, sought to temper his desires with reminders of Confucian duty and Buddhist compassion. She arranged nightly study sessions, translating passages from the Analects and the Shobogenzo, hoping to instill in him the ideals of righteous governance. These quiet lessons were interrupted by a fresh crisis in late 1560. Oda Nobunaga secured an alliance with Tokugawa Ieyasu, turning his gaze toward Mikawa province. Rumors swirled that Tokugawa's left flank might threaten Takeda's southern border. Lady Sanjō immediately dispatched a trusted envoy, Hara Toritane, disguised as a traveling lacquer merchant, to negotiate a non-aggression pact with Ieyasu, offering silk privileges and tax exemptions in exchange for peace. Through sugar-coated verse and ceremonial gifts, Toritane secured Ieyasu's neutrality for 2 precious seasons, buying Shingen time to focus eastward. Lady Sanjō then prepared a new series of letters, some poetic odes to cherry blossoms, others stark warnings of Takeda reprisals to maintain both charm and threat. Amid these external pressures, Yoshinobu's jealousy toward his mother's sway deepened. One night, a vassal overheard Yoshinobu in the sanctuary where Lady Sanjō meditated. "Your counsel saved no fewer lives than father's strategies," he said quietly. "But mine will be the blade that carves our future." Lady Sanjō, eyes closed, replied simply, "A blade alone may splinter. Steel joined in purpose endures through any storm." Though spoken softly, the words stung her son. He stormed out into the courtyard, the moonlight casting his elongated shadow upon the dewy grass. The defining moment arrived at the 4th Battle of Kawanakajima in 1561. Shingen, recognizing that only a decisive blow could curb Usuji Kenshin's incursions, marshaled the largest Takeda host yet assembled. Lady Sanjō, as ever, prepared the logistical backbone. Prepositioned supply caches, hidden medical tents staffed by temple monks, and a network of signal fires in case the main camps fell under duress. Though she did not accompany the army to the field this time, her influence was tangible. Before dawn on engagement day, she dispatched a final envoy to the front bearing a jade talisman, a lotus carved with the Sanjo and Takeda crests interlinked, and a plea for prudence from mother to lord and son alike. The battle itself stretched across the Saigawa plain, massive cavalry charges, flechette volleys from Usuji arquebusiers, and bloody skirmishes at wooded gullies. When Shingen's forces faltered under a sudden counterattack, it was the swift arrival of reserve troops supplied and guided by Lady Sanjo's pre-placed signal fires that prevented a complete rout. In the aftermath, though the battlefield was indecisive, Shingen privately acknowledged that without those reserves, the Takeda host would have collapsed. He sent word to Lady Sanjō, "Your care gilds every victory, even in shadow. I owe today's survival to your unseen hand." Yoshinobu, too, felt a grudging respect. He had commanded one of the reserve units, and he knew their timely appearance was no accident. Yet his pride bristled. He could not admit publicly that his mother's planning equaled his father's valor. Back at Kai, Lady Sanjō oversaw the care of the wounded and the distribution of rewards to surviving families. She composed a memorial service for the fallen, instructing temple priests to read sutras for each name recorded. She then drafted a set of clan edicts reaffirming the principles of loyalty, filial piety, and compassion, her poetic verses interwoven with stern decrees that dishonored betrayal with exile rather than death. In the quiet that followed, tensions between mother and son came to a head. Yoshinobu, frustrated by perceived slights and overshadowed by his mother's omnipresence, plotted in secret with a faction of young retainers who felt the clan needed fresh blood and more aggressive policies. They met in hidden tea houses along the Kofu River, speaking in hushed tones of seizing power once Shingen was away on his next campaign. When rumors of conspiracy reached her ears, Lady Sanjō did not confront her son directly. Instead, she enacted a subtler stratagem. She invited the conspirators to a private poetry gathering in her pavilion, under the pretense of celebrating the return of spring's first swallow. There, she recited verses from the Heike Monogatari warning of the ruin that pride brings and described the fall of the Terra through rhetorical parallels drawn to their own ambitions. She presented each conspirator with a personally crafted fan stamped with the couplet, "A blade that seeks its own glory may pierce the breast of kith and kin." As the guests retired, unsettled by her veiled admonitions, Lady Sanjō sent word to Yoshinobu, "The crane offers guidance, but those who cannot appreciate its flight may find themselves lost in storms." Humiliated and chastened, Yoshinobu desisted from open plotting for a time. He rededicated himself to learning under both his father's generals and his mother's scholars, though the spark of youthful rebellion smoldered within him. Lady Sanjō, watching him with a quiet blend of pride and sorrow, knew that the balance between ambition and duty was as delicate as the craft of folding cranes from paper. The first snows of early winter had barely begun to retreat from the heights of Kawanakajima when Lady Sanjō received word of her husband's passing. Takeda Shingen, her tiger of Kai, her life's steadfast companion, had fallen ill during a campaign near Yoshida Castle. The precise cause remained murky. Some whispered of poisoned tea delivered by a traitorous retainer. Others blamed the cruel fever that swept through encampments in autumn rains. Whatever the truth, the news struck her like a blade to the heart. She was in her private pavilion when the messenger arrived, his breath ragged against the cold. The candlelight danced on his ashen face as he delivered Shingen's final utterances. A plea that she stand as the clan's guiding spirit until their son, Yoshinobu, could assume full command. Trust in crane and tiger alike, he had whispered, and Kai shall endure. Lady Sanjō closed her eyes, recalling the first time she had met Takeda Harunobu beneath Kyoto's lantern glow. She had seen in him a spark of destiny then, an ember she fanned with counsel, patience, and silent devotion. Over decades, that spark had blazed into a roaring conflagration of conquest. Shinano bowed under their banners, the passes of Kai rang with the thunder of cavalry, and the imperial court at last recognized the Takeda's right to govern. She had been his silent partner in every victory, the crane of Kyoto coiling unseen beneath the tiger's roar. Now, without his living presence, she felt exiled in her own castle. Summoning her attendants, she donned the plain black robes of widowhood and took her seat at the head of the council chamber, an unprecedented sight for a woman in Sengoku, Japan. The assembled vassals, from battle-hardened generals to senior court scribes, bowed in deference, recognizing the hallowed weight of her grief. "My lord Takeda Shingen has passed from this world," she began, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "Yet his vision lives on in each of us." The bonds he forged, the alliances we built, and the oaths we swore, these I inherit on his behalf. Let us honor his memory by preserving the clan's unity and securing our lands against any who would exploit our moment of mourning. Across the room, Yoshinobu watched his mother with a mixture of pride and trepidation. He had long awaited his father's final blessing but feared the day would leave him without the guiding hand he so desperately craved. On his mother's throne-like chair, Lady Sanjō embodied both his deepest comfort and looming expectation. In the days that followed, she moved with resolute purpose. First, she dispatched dawn couriers to every Takeda garrison, announcing Shingen's death while demanding immediate fealty to Yoshinobu as heir. Any hint of wavering would be met with swift reprisal, a clear message that the clan's hierarchy must not fragment. Next, she convened a special session of the Kyoto court through her long-standing Fujiwara contacts, securing imperial edicts confirming Yoshinobu's legitimacy as Shugadai of Kai and Miori provinces, and extending honorary titles to his mother as Oderi no Kata, the great lady of the domain. Simultaneously, she turned her attention to the battlefield legacy her husband left behind. The veteran soldiers who still bore his crimson and black banners. Within the castle's inner courtyard, she held a solemn ceremony beneath the great oak of oaths, planted by Shingen himself at the onset of his first campaign into Shinano. Samurai of every rank knelt before her as she recited his personal creed. Though my body falls, my spirit endures. In sunrise's fire and moon's pale gleam, the heart of the samurai remains unshaken, bound by honor, steel, and legacy. When she finished, she turned to the assembled warriors and declared that the tiger's roar would continue through his son, his blood, and her counsel intertwined. In that moment, the clan's cohesion splintered no further. Yet, even as mourning rituals and proclamations secured internal unity, external threats pressed in. Oda Nobunaga, having consolidated Mino under his banner, seized on Takeda Shingen's death as a pretext to advance into former Takeda territories. His matchlock volleys shattered peasant levies at Maiketagahara, sending shockwaves through Kai's southern marches. Simultaneously, the Usuji under Kenshin, ever watchful for weakness, moved to reclaim lost ground at Kawanakajima. Lady Sanjō faced a crucible. With her son still untested in leadership, she had to rally a demoralized but potent fighting force, forge new alliances to deter Oda's incursion, and manage the fragile trust of vassals who questioned whether Yoshinobu could fill his father's boots. Her first act was to call upon the memory of Shingen's greatest triumph, the Fourth Battle of Kawanakajima. She ordered the reassembly of the veteran Crane and Tiger cavalry, now under the joint command of Yoshinobu and the seasoned General Yamagata Masakage. Before their banners, she wrote a stirring address, later known as the Crane's Directive, invoking Shingen's strategy, reminding them that while their lord had passed, his tactics remained a living doctrine. Next, she opened channels to erstwhile rivals turned allies. She dispatched envoys to the Imagawa clan, recalling the marriage alliance she had brokered decades before, and renewed their pact. In exchange for Takeda support against Nobunaga's southern push, the Imagawa would send ships to ferry provisions across Lake Suwa. To the Hojo of Odawara, she offered favorable trade terms on Kai's silk contingent on their frontier garrisoning men at Hakone Pass. These diplomatic overtures, sown with the same finesse as her earlier conquests, bought precious time. By spring's thaw, an uneasy coalition held the Takeda's flanks. Yet at home, Yoshinobu chafed under his mother's guidance. He longed to lead the army personally, to claim the Crane's Directive as his own and to step from behind his mother's shadow. Lady Sanjō, understanding the necessity of his assertion, proposed a compromise. He would command a vanguard force to retake Raiden Castle, recently seized by Usuji's allies, while she maintained overall strategic oversight from Kofu. She drafted detailed marching orders, supply requisitions, and contingency plans, all couched in respectful deference to his authority. As Yoshinobu departed with his bannered cavalry, Lady Sanjō oversaw the final preparations from her command tent, a rich pavilion lined with Kyoto silks and warmed by brazier fires. She penned a farewell note. "My son, may your steel be true, your mind steadfast. Remember that every victory begins in the quiet of preparation, and is secured by the unity of those who follow your banner." She entrusted the letter to a trusted retainer, Obu Toramesa, to hand-deliver at the battlefront. Meanwhile, Back in Kofu, she set in motion measures to fortify the castle against potential night raids. She revised the guard rotations, expanding the nighttime patrols along the inner walls. She ordered the repair and reinforcement of the northwest gate once targeted by Oda saboteurs, and directed the hidden placement of spike traps along likely infiltration routes. She also discreetly arranged for extra provisions, dried legumes, salted fish, and preserved chestnuts, to be stockpiled for civilian families in the event of a siege. Within weeks, raids began. Small bands of Usugi-aligned Ronin tested Takeda's defenses under cover of darkness, only to be met by vigilant patrols. When Yoshinobu's vanguard returned victorious, Raiden Castle once more under Takeda banners, he found his mother's preparations had held firm. He entered the council hall to find Lady Sanjō awaiting him, her robes streaked with ash from the brazier but her poise unbroken. "My mother," he said, bowing deeply. "Your wisdom has kept our home secure while I tested my steel." She inclined her head, eyes soft yet unwavering. "And your valor has reclaimed what was lost. Together, we carry both Crane and Tiger forward." In that union of honor and strategy, the Takeda clan emerged from the winter of mourning into a cautious spring of resurgence. But even as their banners snapped once more in the breeze, Lady Sanjō knew the battle for Kai's survival was far from over. Oda Nobunaga still advanced. The Usugi sought vengeance. And within her own household, ambitions yet unslain awaited their moment. Spring's first cherry blossoms had barely faded when the southern plains of Kai trembled under the march of Oda Nobunaga's armies. News arrived in flurry of dispatches. Columns of Ishigaru, bolstered by Oda's feared arquebusiers, were advancing from Mino province, aiming to seize the fertile fields around Kofu. Lady Sanjō stood at her pavilion's open veranda, the air fragrant with plum blossoms, and watched as couriers arrived one after another, their horses frothing with sweat. With a single sweep of her sleeve, she gathered the reports, tallies of enemy strength, estimated supply loads, and eyewitness accounts of scouts probing Takeda defenses. Her mind raced through strategies old and new. Memories surfaced of past skirmishes, the steel thunder of cavalry at Kawanakajima, the shrewd ambushes she had laid in Shinano, the hushed alliances she had forged with Buddhist temples and Kyoto courtiers. All were tools she had wielded to safeguard her husband's legacy. Now, with her son Yoshinobu at the helm of the army's vanguard, it fell to her to orchestrate the defense of their ancestral home. She summoned her council beneath the great cedar in Kofu's central courtyard. Senior generals, including Yamagata Masakage and Obu Toramesa, stood grim-faced beside young retainer Sakai Tadatsugu. Beside them, Lady Sanjō took her place, not as a ceremonial widow, but as the clan's true strategist. She spoke with the calm precision of a seasoned general. "Oda's forces outnumber ours 2-1 and bring matchlocks that can shatter our cavalry charges. We cannot meet them head-on in open field. Instead, we will draw them into the foothills south of the Hara River where narrow passes and sudden ridges favor ambush. There, we shall employ smoke screens and rolling boulders, tactics adapted from the Jesuit manuals, and strike at their supply wagons. Deprived of food and water, their spirit will falter." The generals exchanged cautious glances. Yamagata bowed. "Your plan holds merit, Lady Sanjō. We will lay false trails of banners toward Mizukami Ridge and establish hidden pits along the Murogi Road." She nodded and continued, her eyes alighting on Sakai Tadatsugu. "Remap the courier routes. I want daily reports from every village militia within 10 leagues. If the enemy shifts, I will know within hours." Toramesa added, "We will also station detachments at the old temple ruins north of Takeda Mine. They can harass Oda's rear guard under cover of night." With lines of communication sealed, Lady Sanjō turned her attention to Kofu Castle itself. She redesigned the rampart's internal walkways, creating concealed passages that allowed defenders to move without exposure to musket fire. She ordered the dismantling of outer granaries, so that if breached, the enemy would find no stores to plunder but redirected supplies into an extensive network of subterranean vaults she had arranged months before. Even the rice for the town's starving peasants was stored under guard in these vaults, to be released only when gates were locked against the besiegers. Meanwhile, the women of the castle, ladies-in-waiting and daughters of minor vassals contributed to the defense. Under Lady Sanjo's direction, they prepared bundles of oil-soaked rags, ready to ignite as fire lures along exposed parapets, and stitched thousands of small flags bearing the crane and tiger crests to confuse Oda's scouts. In the kitchens, they brewed pungent herbal decoctions that, when smoked, dulled the senses of attacking infantry unaccustomed to the fumes. As autumn approached, Oda's banners crested the southern hills. From her pavilion, Lady Sanjō watched columns of Ashigura marching in lockstep, their arquebusiers at the flanks. She opened the dispatch from Yoshinobu, commanding the vanguard now stationed at Mizukami Ridge. Enemy scout columns report Takeda banners in place. They expect us at the Hara River. We stand ready to strike. She penned her reply without hesitation. Hold your position. At dawn, sound the horn of 3 blasts and ignite the first smoke pots. The path to Murogi Road is laid with pits. Harass their flanks. Then fall back to the hidden palisades above the North Bridge. I will lead the main force to trap their advance. She entrusted the message to a swift-footed courier. And by moonrise the plan was in motion. Dawn broke in a haze of gray. The first dull blasts of smoke rolled upward from concealed braziers. Blue-gray clouds drifted down the hillside like errant whispers. Confused, Oda's arquebusiers raised their muskets, but their volleys rattled harmlessly against rock walls. At the horn's third blast, Yoshinobu's cavalry surged down the ridge, striking swiftly at stretched supply lines, severing ropes, and overturning wagons. Behind him, Lady Sanjō led a reserve contingent labeled civilian laborers to Oda's spies but composed of hardened Ashiguru through the labyrinthine trails she had carved beneath the forest canopy. When the attackers realized their baggage train had vanished, panic rippled through their ranks. Torimasa's detachments emerged from hidden trenches, rolling massive boulders that crushed infantry formations and drove horses into flight. Caught between the sun's shock cavalry and the mother's hidden blade, Oda's forces broke in chaos, retreating toward Mino with heavy losses. Their banners half-mast as they fled, they became the talk of every provincial town. The tiger and the crane had, together, stung the Oda to retreat. Yet triumph hid its own seeds of discord. Yoshinobu, riding beside his mother after the battle, sensed the admiration of troops for Lady Sanjo's design. When he approached her, helmet removed and armor dulled by smoke, he said quietly, "Your tactics have won more than my sword this day." She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Your charge was the hammer, my plan the anvil." Together they forged victory. But in his heart, Yoshinobu bristled. He longed to hear praise for his discipline, his command. Instead, it was the crane's wisdom lauded above all. Back in Kofu, as they distributed captured matchlocks among Takeda arsenals, Lady Sanjō turned her attention inward. Though the immediate threat had receded, she knew Oda Nobunaga would return with greater force, and likely with reinforcements from Tokugawa Ieyasu. To prepare, she called upon Kyoto's exiled courtiers, now living cloistered among Kai's mountain temples, to draft a new constitution for the clan, the Crane's Edict, an unprecedented code that balanced martial law with protections for peasants, merchants, and temple lands. She convened a council in the hidden oak hall, its walls lined with scrolls of past campaigns, and invited voices from every stratum: seasoned generals, junior samurai, merchant leaders, and even the head monk of Takeda. Together they debated clauses on land tenure, military obligations, and the rights of non-combatants. Lady Sanjō guided the debate with subtle questions. How might we prevent famine during prolonged sieges? What penalties ensure loyalty without crushing hope? How do we honor those who fight without forgetting those who serve behind the banner? After weeks of deliberation, the Crane's Edict emerged. A living document read aloud in every Takeda stronghold, recited by village headmen beside communal shrines. It stipulated that any vassal found hoarding grain would forfeit half his lands, but that a portion of confiscated stores would feed the peasantry. It protected traveling merchants under Takeda escort, fostering trade that replenished the clan's coffers. And it decreed that widows and orphans of slain soldiers be granted stipends, ensuring the fallen's families remained loyal. Within court and countryside alike, the edict shone as a beacon, proof that the Crane of Kyoto's compassion matched her steel. Yet, as the laws took hold, friction with Yoshinobu deepened. He questioned the protections for civilians, arguing that strict discipline and priority to the army must come first. He advocated for harsher punishments and expanded conscription to bolster defenses. Lady Sanjō, firm in her convictions, warned that a ruler who broke his people's bonds risked losing their hearts as well as their swords. Their disagreements came to a head one moonlit night in the council chamber. Yoshinobu, flush with victory, declared, "If Oda returns with threefold armies, where will your edict save us? We need every able hand." Lady Sanjō, eyes reflecting lantern light, replied, "Strength born of fear is brittle. True power rests in the unity of ruler and ruled." He rose, sleeves brushing polished floorboards. "I will not let compassion weaken our spear arms." She rose as well, stepping forward. "And I will not let cruelty shatter our souls. Remember, my son, a spear cannot stand alone. It requires a hand both firm and wise." Their words hung between them like a charged blade. Neither yielded. Yet beneath the tension lay a shared love, hers the quiet hope that he might temper his ambition, his the fierce desire to prove himself beyond the shadow of crane and tiger alike. That night, Lady Sanjō retired to her pavilion and penned a new poem, folding it within a letter she would send at dawn. A lone crane in storm-tossed skies finds its wings weighed by wind's cold hand, yet guided by the steadfast heart, it soars anew toward distant land. As the letter winged its way to Yoshinobu's camp, Lady Sanjō prepared the clan for the trials yet to come. Oda's inevitable return, the Yasuji's lurking vengeance, and the deeper rifts growing even within her own family. The crane's flight, she knew, must be matched by the tiger's roar for Kai to endure. Late autumn's first frost still clung to the cedars when the unmistakable drums of war beat once more at Kai's southern borders. Oda Nobunaga, enraged by his earlier repulse, had marshaled a massive host, 10,000 arquebusiers, 2,000 cuirassed cavalry, and an army of foot soldiers twice the size of Takeda's muster. Their banners, emblazoned with the Oda crest, cut a stark contrast against Kai's crimson and black standard. Lady Sanjō stood upon Kofu's battlements alongside Yoshinobu. In the pale dawn light, she traced the enemy lines spread before them like black snakes. Behind him, veteran generals Masakage, Toramesa, Tadatsugu awaited the commander's orders. Though Yoshinobu had grown into a capable leader, the specter of his mother's strategies still hovered over every plan. "My son," Lady Sanjō said softly, "this will be Oda's greatest test of steel and ours of spirit. Remember our lessons, draw him into the narrow gorges, divide his arquebusiers, and strike his flanks with sudden thunder." He met her gaze, resolve and conflict warring in his eyes. "I will honor your counsel, mother." Yet he paused, glancing toward the valley below where the enemy's wagons rolled like iron thunder. "I must also prove that my command stands on its own, unshadowed by the crane." She inclined her head. "As you wish. May your blade speak as clearly as your heart." With that blessing, Yoshinobu mounted his steed and led the vanguard eastward toward the narrow Saka Gorge, while Lady Sanjō oversaw the defense of Kofu. The valleys echoed with distant horns and the crackling of matchlock fire. Couriers raced between camps and townsfolk shuttered windows, praying for deliverance. Yoshinobu's plan mirrored his mother's edict: lure the Oda forward through the constricted pass. As dawn broke on November 2nd, he posted a Shigeru musketeers at hidden outcrops, placed spearmen in ambush among fallen timber, and stationed cavalry reserves atop the ridge. When Oda's scouts advanced, they found the gorge deceptively deserted, save for banners that fluttered in the smoky light. At midday, the main host entered the gorge, their cavalry compressed by the sheer walls on either side. Suddenly, arquebus volleys erupted from concealed alcoves, thousands of projectiles clipped horses and shattered shields. Panic rippled through the columns, and Yoshinobu seized the moment, charging downhill with his mounted guard. Steel rang against iron as banners met in blood. Yet the Oda, seasoned by years of unbroken conquest, deployed their own counterambush. Kunai-armed infantry emerged from secret tunnels, cutting off Takeda's rear guard. Yoshinobu's force, encircled and outnumbered, faced the prospect of annihilation. The ground was stained red. Wounded men cried for water. Desperate, he sent his fastest runner with a plea for aid to Kofu. Meanwhile, high on the ridge, Lady Sanjō received the missive. Without hesitation, she marshaled her household guard and local militia, nearly 1,000 men, and led them by hidden mountain trails to the gorge's southern mouth. Under her direction, Toramesa's detachment lit massive smoke pots, sowing confusion among the Oda musketeers. As the enemy's volleys faltered, she ordered a downhill cavalry charge that crashed into their flanks. Caught between Yoshinobu's trapped forces and his mother's descending tide, Nobunaga's host faltered. By dusk, the Takeda had inflicted over 3,000 casualties and forced a retreat. Yoshinobu, bloodied and hollow-eyed, staggered from the fray to his mother's side. His gratitude was profound and tinged with remorse. Back at Kofu, victory celebrations mingled uneasily with loss. The slain were brought within the crane's vaults. The wounded tended in temple clinics. The survivors drank sake in silent tribute. Yoshinobu, his armor stained with mud and sweat, sought Lady Sanjō in the pavilion's dimly lit corridor. "Mother," he whispered, "I would have died without your hand." She placed a slender arm around his shoulders. "And I would follow you to the end of the world. But remember, my son, that each life we spare, villager or warrior, binds us closer to the land we defend." He bowed his head. "I understand. Yet sometimes, to protect all, we must harden our hearts." A hush fell between them. Lady Sanjō closed her eyes, recalling the first time she guided him in archery. His youthful misfires and tears. Now he was a man of war, tempered on the anvil of siege and skirmish. Could she temper his steel without breaking his spirit? As winter deepened, Takeda's northern border grew restless. Usuji Kenshin saw in Shingen's passing the glimmer of opportunity to reclaim Kawanakajima. Bandits, possibly in Usuji Pei, harassed outlying villages. Murakami loyalists raided supply lines. Despite the crane's edicts and the tiger's roar, cracks appeared in the clan's unity. Worse, within the castle walls, murmurs rose of Yoshinobu's growing authority and of Lady Sanjo's diminishing influence. Some vassals whispered that the great ladies' council, once vital to Shingen, now held back the clan from true domination under its new lord. They urged Yoshinobu to assume sole control, to relieve his mother of public duties, and to pursue an unrestrained campaign of expansion. When such suggestions reached her chamber, Lady Sanjō did not lash out. Instead, she convened a midnight meeting with her closest retainers, Masakage, Toramesa, and the head monk of Takeda. She spoke of loyalty and lineage, of the crane's promise to shield the people and the tiger's duty to protect. She urged the generals to remind Yoshinobu that a ruler divided within would fall to forces without. Their loyalty to her and to the Takeda's legacy remained unbroken. Yet neither could they ignore the rising ambition in the young lord's heart. In February's chill, word arrived that Usuji Kenshin had gathered his forces at the northern passes, ready to strike. Yoshinobu, keen to avenge past defeats, prepared to lead a massive offensive. Lady Sanjō, frail beneath her widow's robes, demanded to accompany him for the last time. She would not abandon her son nor the clan she had nurtured. On a cold dawn, mother and son rode side by side, their horses' breath steaming in the frosty air. She carried in her cloak a small birch box. Within it lay Shingen's war fan and a folded verse written in his own hand. At the front lines, Yoshinobu paused, glancing down at the box. "Father's fan," he murmured. "Will it guide us as it did him?" Lady Sanjō smiled, a sad, gentle curve. "Your father's spirit guides through you. Open it when fear grips your heart." They entered the valley to the roar of Kenshin's drums. The once familiar battlefield stretched cold and barren. As they took their positions, Yoshinobu turned to his mother. "Teach me once more," he said quietly. "Teach me to be both crane and tiger." She placed her hand upon his arm, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Remember always. A tiger's roar breaks the silence of doubt. A crane's wings bear the weight of hope." The ensuing engagement was fierce and brief. Kenshin's cavalry charged with feral intensity. Muskets spat fire from wooded ridges. Yoshinobu, drawing upon his mother's and father's teachings, rallied his men, holding the line until flanks could pivot. In the chaos, he felt Shingen's fan rap in his mind, a burst of calm amid the storm. Under his command, the Takeda forces repelled the invaders, though at heavy cost. As dusk fell, both armies withdrew. The field lay strewn with broken banners and fallen men. Yoshinobu, exhausted, dismounted beside Lady Sanjō. He retrieved the war fan and spread it open. In its paper, Shingen's last poem glowed. "When the storm dies, only embers remain. From those embers, new fire will bloom. Let courage light the darkest night, and mercy guide the dawn's first plume." Yoshinobu's shoulders sagged with grief and relief. "He speaks through me still," he whispered. She placed an arm around him. "And I, through you, Yet even in victory, Lady Sanjō sensed embers of discord. Yoshinobu's glory was confirmed, yet his heart drifted further from her gentle precepts. The clan's coffers brimmed with tribute. Merchants sought greater privileges. Vassals urged campaigns deeper into Shinano, Mino, and beyond. Back in Kofu's council hall, Yoshinobu unveiled plans for a great invasion of Mikawa, to seize Tokugawa's lands and secure a sea route to the capital. Many generals cheered. Lady Sanjo's eyes dulled with concern. She rose to speak, voice resonant in the vaulted chamber. Remember where we stand. On land bought by blood and protected by the bonds we forge. Overreach may drown us in a tide we cannot summon. A murmur rose. Yoshinobu's brow darkened. We are no longer children of caution, he replied. We are heirs to the tiger's domain, and we shall claim all that is due. Lady Sanjo bowed, face serene. Then I shall prepare you as best I can, though the crane knows when to fly and when to lay its eggs in safety. Her words carried a finality that echoed in every heart. She left the council. The click of her geta on stone hushed by foreboding. As winter 1562 gave way to spring, the stage was set. Lady Sanjo, having guided her clan through mourning, resurgence, and redemption, now watched her son stride toward a destiny both grand and precarious. Oda Nobunaga massed his forces anew. Yasuji Kenshin's eyes gleamed with anticipated vengeance. And Tokugawa Ieyasu watched from Mikawa's lowlands, balancing alliances. Within Kofu's walls, the crane's edict continued to govern daily life. Yet its creator feared that ambition might erode its promises. Yoshinobu, for all his filial reverence, seemed resolved to prove himself beyond his parents' legacies, an endeavor that would test every bond, every strategy, and every ounce of compassion she could muster. The winter mists had scarcely lifted from Kai's valleys when rumors of dissent began to swirl through Kofu Castle's corridors like restless spirits. What began as whispered doubts among junior vassals, questions about Yoshinobu's suitability to command, murmurs that the crane's gentle hand was unnecessary, soon solidified into clandestine schemes. Even as Lady Sanjo rose before dawn to perform her prayers at the shrine built in memory of Takeda Shingen, she felt the undercurrents of betrayal gathering strength in the stones around her. From the outset, Yoshinobu's ambitions had been tempered by filial piety. He sought to honor both his father's martial legacy and his mother's counsel. But with each victory over Oda's forces, each repulsion of Yasuji incursions, his confidence swelled into something fiercer and less patient. He began to chafe at the crane's edict, the code she had painstakingly woven to protect commoners and clergy alike. In the war council, where generals once deferred to his mother's balanced judgments, he now bristled when her voice rose above his own. Subtle shifts in seating arrangements, in which he claimed the central seat and relegated her to its side, signaled the changing power dynamic. Lady Sanjo sensed the turning tide but remained true to her nature. She watched, she listened, and she sought to shore up the bonds that held the clan together. She reinforced alliances with the Hojo and the Imagawa, sending renewal envoys and fresh gifts of silk and tea-ware, while quietly pressing for an end to Keifu districts over zealous grain requisitions, fearful that peasant resentment might spark open revolt. She dispatched trusted retainers, Masakage and Toramesa, to keep their ears to the ground, encouraging them to remind Yoshinobu of the human cost of war and the fragility of loyalty in harsh times. By spring of 1563, the first seeds of open conspiracy had taken root. A faction of Yoshinobu's peers, ambitious young samurai who longed for campaigns beyond Kai's mountains, began to question whether the clan's fortunes were being held back by what they called overcautious sympathy. They met in hidden tea houses along the Kofu River, their voices hushed as they plotted to compel Lady Sanjo to retire from public affairs. Encouraged by these voices, Yoshinobu privately pressed his mother to relinquish her role as regent, offering to allow her advisory title in name, but insisting that all decisions be channeled through his war council. In the candlelit hush of her pavilion, Lady Sanjo received his petition with grace, yet her heart recoiled. She recognized the danger. A division between regent and lord would fracture the delicate unity she had maintained for decades. Summoning all her resolve, she sought a compromise. With careful deference, she agreed to step back from routine military councils so long as she retained the right to oversee internal affairs, grain distribution, peasant protections. temple relations and to review any hard-won alliances before they were sealed in blood. Yoshinobu nodded, convinced that removing her from his strategic sessions would grant him freedom to exercise his own command. Within days, however, he discovered that a ruler untempered by compassionate counsel could find himself adrift. On the southern frontier, a routine foray into Oda-held territory met with unexpected resistance. Lacking the crane's ordering hand, his vanguard was split by a narrow ravine and over 100 Ashigaru were lost before reinforcements arrived. Rumors of the debacle spread swiftly, undermining the morale of frontier garrisons. Only the remnants of Lady Sanjō's hidden supply caches rediscovered by loyal retainers prevented outright collapse. Yet in his frustration, Yoshinobu lashed out. He punished the young officer in command with exile and confiscation of lands, a severity his mother had rarely countenanced. The exile became the spark that ignited open conflict. Disgruntled underlords, fearful of the lord's volatility, sought audience with Lady Sanjō, imploring her to mediate. In the council hall of scrolls, its walls lined with treaties and family registers, she convened a gathering of all who held fiefs over 500 koku. As torches flickered overhead, she spoke not as a widow or as a regent, but as the clan's matriarch. Lords of Kai, she began, her voice firm yet gentle, our strength lies in unity tempered by compassion. If we fracture now, Oda's fire will consume us all. Let us remember that the tiger and the crane soared together. Divided, we fall like leaves in winter's wind. Her words hushed the murmuring. Many bowed their heads, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Yoshinobu sat to her right, his posture rigid, his expression guarded. He rose after her, steel in his gaze as he spoke of the need for decisive action, of striking swiftly against Oda before he could muster fresh legions. His tone, though respectful, carried an edge that stung the gathering. In that charged atmosphere, Lady Sanjō recognized the final measure of her influence. She allowed Yoshinobu's motion to pass, a limited offensive to secure a buffer zone south of the Hara River, under the condition that civilian provisions remain inviolate. As the lords dispersed, some offering silent bows of gratitude, others glaring with unresolved resentment, she sought Yoshinobu's eyes. He offered a curt nod. The crane yielded the floor. Yet retreating from the war council did not satisfy the conspirators. Emboldened by the lord's acquiescence, they pressed Yoshinobu to take firmer control. A meeting convened in secret beneath the castle's tea gardens, where masked conspirators, some bearing the crests of minor clans, spoke of convincing the regent to retire entirely, of seizing her estates if necessary. A plan formed. On the night before the offensive's launch, loyal Ashigaru would surround her pavilion and compel her to sign over her lands and titles. Yoshinobu, they believed, would have no choice but to confirm the transfer lest he appear weak. Lady Sanjō, however, received an unlooked-for warning. One of her oldest attendants, Sumira no Suk, had remained ever watchful, feeding her reports with the subtle skill of a court confidant. On a gray afternoon, Suk appeared at her sliding door, his eyes heavy with concern. "My lady," he murmured, "a darkness gathers among those you once held dear. They speak of removing you from your own home, of taking lands you have stewarded these many years." Lady Sanjō's heart clenched, but her face remained composed. She thanked him and bade him stand guard. Retreating to her inner sanctum, she gathered her sons. Yoshinobu was away at the southern front, but her younger son, Katsuyori, now 15, knelt at her side. Though not destined to inherit, he was a mirror of youthful eagerness tempered with a quieter temperament. To Katsuyori she softly described the betrayal. "They seek to dissolve the bonds I forged in peace," she said. "To seize what I have protected, as if strength were measured by theft rather than stewardship." He straightened, eyes fierce. "Mother, grant me soldiers. Let me defend you, as you have defended us." Her gaze softened. "Your courage honors me, but this must be resolved without further bloodshed. We must awaken your brother's heart before the conspirators' blade falls." Determined, she dispatched Katsuyori with 2 retainers to the front lines, carrying messages sealed with her personal crest. He was to seek out Yoshinobu before dawn on the eve of the campaign's launch, to remind him of the bond between Crane and Tiger and, if necessary, to protect her until she could take sanctuary in the temple she had founded north of Kofu. That night, as quiet snow fell beyond the castle walls, Lady Sanjō readied herself. She dressed in ceremonial robes, deep blue silk embroidered with cranes in flight, and prepared offerings for her shrine. Incense, white chrysanthemums, and a folded petition to the kami for protection. Her attendants, 3 devoted women, stood vigilant at every entry, their eyes reflecting both fear and loyalty. Just before midnight, the hush shattered. Armed as Shigeru, their armor clinking, moved in through the moonlit courtyard, torches casting long shadows against the stone. At their head strode Seiki Kazumasa, a once trusted retainer now blinded by ambition. He bore a sealed writ, Yoshinobu's seal. Or so it appeared, ordering the regent's forced retirement and transfer of her estates to the lord's direct control. Lady Sanjō awaited them in her inner chamber, unmoved. As the soldiers formed a semicircle, Seiki flung down the writ and sneered, "The lord commands. Submit your seals, great lady, or forfeit your holdings and your life." She rose, serene. "You overstep. Kazumasa, the seal you bear is forged by treachery, not by my son's hand. I call upon you to lay down your weapons and swear fealty once more, lest you stain your honor with falsehood." Kazumasa laughed harshly. "Honor is for poets and scholars. The blade obeys might alone." At his signal, the soldiers advanced. With a calm born of decades of peril, Lady Sanjō turned toward her attendants. Whispering a single word, now she released the hidden cord beneath her sleeve. Instantly, the tapestry behind her fell, revealing a concealed alcove where 2 samurai stood poised with drawn swords. Behind them, Katsuyori's 2 companions emerged from the shadows, having crept through a postern gate guided by one of her loyal pages. Caught between Crane and Tiger's offspring, the conspirators stood aghast. Seiki raised his blade, fury contorting his features. But the pair of samurai blocked his advance. A clash rang out, steel singing through the candlelit air as Seiki's men hesitated, uncertain whether to side with ambition or with the lawful regent. In that moment of suspended breath, Lady Sanjō stepped forward, her voice clear as bell chimes. "Let this night's betrayal be your final error. Lay down your steel, and you may yet earn forgiveness through service anew. Persist, and you meet the fate you sought to impose upon me." One by one, conscience outweighed greed. Seiki's soldiers, half ashamed, half fearful, dropped their swords. Kazumasa himself, chest heaving, stood defiant until Katsuyori stepped close, young eyes blazing like his mother's. "You have erred gravely," the boy said, voice steady. "Yet, if you repent, you may still serve our clan. Persist, and you fall by steel you raised in my mother's halls." Kazumasa's shoulders drooped. He spat on the ground, relinquished his weapon, and bowed deeply before Lady Sanjō. The writ he had borne she reclaimed, breaking it into pieces with tremulous fingers. One fragment she tucked into her bosom, a warning. Perhaps that even in victory the crane's vigilance must never falter. By dawn's first light, the sun glinted off the broken surface of the shattered writ. Lady Sanjō emerged onto the courtyard platform, surrounded by loyal samurai and her weeping attendants. She bowed to the assembled troops, her strength tested, her estate preserved, her authority reaffirmed. When Yoshinobu returned with his vanguard, he found the castle calm yet charged with silent tension. His younger brother Katsuyori led him to the chamber where Lady Sanjō awaited. At their mutual bow he knelt, head bowed in contrition. "My lord," he said softly, "their ambition overcame them. I prevented bloodshed in faith to our mother's guidance." Yoshinobu rose, emotions flickering across his features. Pride, relief, and a lingering edge of wounded ego. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Lady Sanjō's shoulder. "Mother, your vigilance has saved our house again. Forgive my absence." She inclined her head, offering a faint smile. "You have learned your lesson, my son, that power unchecked by compassion breeds its own ruin. Let us now turn together toward the campaign, united in purpose and in heart." In that fragile reconciliation, they stood as family once more, the crane and the tiger poised on the precipice of destiny. Yet Lady Sanjō knew that true peace was as fleeting as the fog in the mornings, soon to be tested by fresh assaults from the Usuji, renewed thrusts from Oda, and dangers that no scheme of diplomacy or strategy could wholly avert. But for now, under the pale winter sun, she embraced the dawn of a new chapter, one born of blood, loyalty, and the relentless hope that a regent's wisdom might yet guide her clan through the gathering storms ahead. The bitter winds of early spring carried the scent of thawing snow through Kai province as the Takeda banner once again unfurled across the Kofu plain. Under the crane's edict, the countryside had begun to stir with new life. Plowshares turned rich loam, and citrus groves, nurtured through the lean years, burst with fruit. Yet beneath this pastoral renewal lay an undercurrent of unease. Takeda Yoshinobu, now lord of Kai in name and deed, brooded over his station. In his eyes, he saw the reflection not of a son honoring his father's legacy, but of a man trapped beneath the weight of the crane's legacy, a legacy he believed he must shatter to rule unambiguously. It was in this atmosphere of restless ambition that whispers of sedition first drifted through the corridors of Kofu Castle. A contingent of mid-level samurai, once loyal to Lady Sanjō's gentle influence, began to chafe under the restrictions of her edicts. They argued that the clan's future lay in aggressive expansion beyond the borders of Kai, that Oda Nobunaga's growing power in the south demanded swift, unhesitating response. In hushed gatherings beneath torches in the East Wing, they plotted to dethrone the crane, to strip Lady Sanjō of her estates and titles on the pretext that her compassion weakened the tiger's roar. At the center of this conspiratorial circle stood Yoshinobu himself, torn between filial devotion and the forging of his own destiny. He was courted by voices urging him to assert his authority without restraint. Among them, the retainer Seiki Kazumasa, once rebuffed by Lady Sanjō's mercy, whispered of seizing Kofu Castle and exiling the regent to the temple she had founded in the northern hills. Only then, Seiki promised, will you stand free to unleash the full might of the Takeda against Oda and Yasuji alike. Yoshinobu, shaken by the tumult of loyalty and ambition, posed the question to his mother in private council. In the shadowed recesses of her pavilion he pressed her, must I forever govern in the crane's shadow? Grant me authority unshared, and I swear our clan will conquer new lands. Deny me and the tiger will be caged. Lady Sanjō, her face traced with lines of sorrow and resolve, replied, my son, authority without compassion breeds tyranny. The tiger's roar cracks the silence, but the crane's wings carry the weight of those who follow. Without both, your victory will be hollow. Her words, gentle in tone yet absolute, hardened Yoshinobu's resolve. He withdrew, unable to reconcile his mother's vision with his own hunger for glory. Within weeks, the conspiracy ripened. Seiki and his co-conspirators, numerous minor lords and ambitious cavalry captains, made their move. In the gloom before dawn, they marched on Lady Sanjō's pavilion, steel glinting under the moon. Yet this time, they were not met by her loyal samurai. She had anticipated their betrayal. With Kachiyori's aid, she and her attendants fled through a secret tunnel to the safety of Takeda, the temple fortress she had endowed on the northern slopes. As the mutineers seized the vacant pavilion and proclaimed Yoshinobu's decree dissolving her regency, alarm bells rang through Kofu Castle. The city's merchants and peasants, loyal to the crane who had protected them, rose in protest. Their shouts filled the streets. Mid-level samurai, recalling Lady Sanjō's kindness, defected from the coup to form an armed cordon around the temple. Yoshinobu, realizing the breadth of the uprising, rode with his guard toward the temple gates. Before him stood Masakage and Toramesa, stalwarts who had served both Shingen and Lady Sanjō with unwavering loyalty. They barred his path. Lord Yoshinobu, Masakage said, voice firm, your mother fled here by necessity. We will not serve a command born of treachery. Toramesa added, you would exile the crane who guided us through the darkest storms. This clan will fracture if you press onward. Yoshinobu's eyes blazed with fury and hurt pride. She defies my will. She must obey. In that moment of crisis, a bird's cry echoed from the temple's eaves. From the silent hillside descended riders bearing banners of the Imagawa and Hojo, those alliances Lady Sanjō had courted with such care. They had seen the conflict and come to honor their pact. Their presence turned the balance. Yoshinobu's conspirators, faced with the united might of three clans, faltered. Cornered in the antechamber of the temple's inner sanctum, Yoshinobu confronted his mother. In the flickering oil lantern light, he accused her. You manipulate our allies while I fight our enemies. You usurp what is rightfully mine. Lady Sanjō stood unmoved, her voice calm yet unyielding. I placed our clan's welfare above my own pride. You would have destroyed the unity that binds us. Distraught, Yoshinobu reached for his sword. Then I will break those bonds myself. Before steel could be drawn, Masakage intervened, his blade at Yoshinobu's throat. Not with my hand, my lord. Silence fell. The allied banners snapped in the pre-dawn breeze as Yoshinobu's conspirators lowered their weapons, shame and fear in their eyes. In the wake of the failed coup, the Council of Alliance, Takeda, Imagawa, and Hojo, convened beneath the white-washed walls of Takeda-dera. There, Lady Sanjō delivered an impassioned address. We stand at the crossroads of destiny. United, we defy Oda's ambition. Divided, we fall to it. My son's struggles mirror the tiger's need to roar and the crane's need to protect. Let us not see filial love become the fault line that breaks our clan. Representatives of each allied house pledged renewed fealty to Lady Sanjō's leadership in matters of governance and to Yoshinobu's command in battle, each recognizing that only the fusion of their allied eyes could preserve Kai's future. Yoshinobu, humbled yet still proud, knelt before his mother. His voice broke as he spoke. Forgive me, mother. I have sought power where I should have sought unity. Lady Sanjō rested a hand on his head. Strength and mercy are not enemies, my son. From this day, let us bind our hearts with both. Despite this reconciliation, the fallout was severe. Conspirators were stripped of their lands. Some were exiled, others were forced to commit seppuku. The spectacle sent shockwaves through the samurai class, curbing further dissent but also seeding resentment that would smolder in silent corners of the domain. Lady Sanjō then turned her attention to healing the clan's wounds. She organized a grand festival of the two spirits, weaving together martial displays and poetic recitations to honor both the tiger and the crane. Soldiers returned the next day to find banners hanging alongside silk kimonos, while civilians lined the castle walls with lanterns, symbols of shared fate and renewed loyalty. In the festival's heart, Lady Sanjō and Yoshinobu stood together on Kofu's main stage. He presented her with his father's dawn fan, freshly lacquered and inlaid with mother-of-pearl cranes, and she, in turn, bestowed upon him a sheathed katana, its guard shaped like a soaring bird. These tokens, exchanged before vassals and peasants alike, sealed their reconciliation in blood and in spirit. Yet beneath the festival's joy lay a cautionary undercurrent. Power untempered could fracture the strongest bonds, and forgiveness, though generous, carried the weight of trust that must be honored. As dawn gave way to sunrise on that bright spring morning, Lady Sanjō penned a new poem. When storms have passed, the blossoms fall. Yet petals cling to dearest boughs. Forgiveness binds what pride would rend, and hope blooms where loyalty vows. Late spring of 1575 broke over Kai province with pale sunlight glinting on new leaves and the low rumble of distant war drums. The reconciliation between Lady Sanjō and her son Yoshinobu had restored unity to the Takeda household. Yet beneath the calm surface lay currents of ambition and miscalculation that would soon sweep the clan toward disaster. As summer's warmth settled into the valleys, a fresh threat gathered on the southern horizon. Oda Nobunaga, now allied with Tokugawa Ieyasu, prepared to strike at the heart of Takeda power. Lady Sanjō, ever vigilant, convened her war council beneath the pavilion's silk canopies. The generals, Yamagata Masakage, Obu Toramesa, and the veteran Kosaka Masanobu, stood in a half-circle, parchment maps unfurled at their feet. Yoshinobu, clad in lacquered armor etched with his father's tiger emblem, moved to Lady Sanjō's side. She placed a guiding hand on his sleeve. Remember, she said softly, the blade of victory is tempered by prudence. Oda's firearms and Ieyasu's banner armies are unlike any we have faced. He met her gaze, steel in his eyes. I will honor your counsel. We shall draw them into the hills of Nagashino, where their ranks must break to pass. Though she harbored doubts, having studied Jesuit treatises on pike and shot formations and learned of volley tactics that could decimate cavalry charges, she aligned her strategy with her son's plan. In the weeks that followed, Lady Sanjō oversaw the harvesting of summer rice, ensuring that grain reserves at Kofu and Oshima would sustain the army through a protracted campaign. She dispatched covert emissaries to friendly clans in Shinano and Mikawa, begging for militia support and local guides versed in the ridgeline terrain around the Tenryu River. Every detail, from the number of archers to the placement of hidden spearmen, was passed through her skilled hands. Yet Yoshinobu, eager to validate his own command, grew restless. He pushed to mass the full cavalry strength, once the pride of Takeda, against the Oda-Tokugawa alliance near Nagashino Castle. Despite Lady Sanjō's warnings that Oda's volley fire would shred mounted ranks in the open plain, he insisted that discipline and speed would carry the day. She relented, dispatching riders with last-minute orders to fortify weak points and to prepare fallback positions in the wooded slopes of Mount Kasagi. On June 28, 1575, the armies met in the dawn mist at Nagashino. The Takeda cavalry, banners snapping like thunderclaps, charged in waves across the rice fields. But from across the valley, Oda's gunners, deployed behind rows of wooden palisades, unleashed a storm of lead. Horse after horse fell, riders thrown into the mud. Yoshinobu's reserve units, held back as Lady Sanjō had advised, managed to flank some arquebusiers, but the tide of bullets did not abate. By noon, the field was strewn with the wounded and the dead. The cavalry's luster was shattered. Lady Sanjō, observing from a hilltop pavilion hastily erected for the campaign, saw the horror unfold with a mother's anguish. Messengers in tatters bore the news: the vanguard had been decimated. From the pavilion, she dispatched her steadiest generals, Masakage and Toramesa, to extract the remnants and to cover the retreat. She turned her attention to organizing mobile field hospitals, drawing on the networks of temple monks she had maintained. Sutra scrolls stitched into linen pouches were handed to splintered commanders to distribute to the dying as final solace. When at last the battered columns returned to Kofu, Yoshinobu rode within them, face drawn and bloodied. Lady Sanjō met him at the gates, her hands trembling as she dismounted to embrace him. "You kept your men alive," she whispered, voice quavering against the backdrop of groans and sobs from the wounded. "That in itself is victory." He bowed his head, tears glinting in the sun. "I misjudged their weapons. I have failed our father's legacy." Her arms tightened around him. "We learn through ashes, my son. We shall rebuild." In the wake of Nagashino's disaster, Takeda prestige waned. Daimyo who had once sworn fealty recast their loyalties to Oda or Tokugawa. Merchants paused shipments through Kai's mountain passes, fearing pillage. Lady Sanjō faced the greatest test of her statesmanship since Shingen's death. She embarked on a campaign of reconciliation, writing personal letters to wavering vassals, invoking solemn memories of shared campaigns, hosting tea ceremonies in the castle gardens where she pleaded for renewed allegiance in exchange for gracious pardons and reaffirmed stipends. To the local peasantry, she opened granaries, distributing rice and millet to quell panic. Over 6 months, her efforts wove a fragile tapestry of unity. Yet in the quiet corridors, Yoshinobu's frustration festered. He felt his mother's influence pried open the minds of his retainers, undermining his own authority. He brooded over every decision she made, every treaty she brokered. Though he publicly praised her efforts at festivals and in proclamations, he chafed at being tied to what he called the crane's shadow. By winter of 1576, his impatience broke through restraint. He announced a bold campaign into Shinana's northwestern valleys, seeking to seize fertile basins left undefended while Oda pressed westward into Mino. Lady Sanjō, recalling the failure at Nagashino, urged caution: first secure the southern flank, rebuild cavalry strength, and strengthen alliances with the Yasuji under newly negotiated terms. She proposed a diplomatic marriage between Katsuyori, now of marriageable age, and a niece of Yasuji Kenshin, a union that might seal peace. Yoshinobu, perceiving such measures as timid, stormed from the council hall. "Peace through marriage is the refuge of the weak," he declared. "Our enemies respect only the sword's edge." He dismissed Katsuyori's marriage prospects and ordered mobilization. Distressed, Lady Sanjō withdrew to her pavilion, consulting old letters from Fujiwara courtiers and Jesuit missionaries alike, seeking a path to guide her son's fervor into tempered strength. She penned another entreaty, folding within it clauses that acknowledged Yoshinobu's command but insisted on her oversight of logistics and local governance. When the messenger returned with Yoshinobu's curt refusal, he now preferred to leave domestic affairs to her elders. She realized that the bonds of mutual respect were fraying. As spring melted into summer of 1577, the Takeda host moved north toward Lake Suwa. The campaign began with initial success. Lightly defended shrines and hamlets fell quickly, and supply lines, overseen by Lady Sanjō's subordinates, functioned smoothly. Yet the sharp-eyed scouts of Usuji Kenshin, ever diligent, harassed flanks and burned provisions surrogate to prevent overreach. Yoshinobu, enraged, led a punitive raid deep into Ekigo's borderlands where the aging Kenshin, now nearing death himself, watched with wary satisfaction. Back in Kofu, Lady Sanjō orchestrated relief efforts for families sent north as hostages, arranged emergency rice shipments through alternate passes, and dispatched pleas to Hojo and Imagawa for reinforcements. Her final act, as she watched her only remaining son push for glory, was to convene a midnight vigil at the temple where Shingen's ashes rested. There, before his incense-streaked shrine, she prayed, "Canon of mercy, grant me strength to guide the tiger's roar with crane's grace, to shield the innocent from ambition's thirst, and to bear the weight of fate that binds us all." Her tears fell onto the stone dais, mingling with melted snow. The decisive blow came in 1578 at the Battle of Temokuzan. Yoshinobu's vanguard, stretched thin by eagerness to claim the Usuji heartland, found itself surrounded in a narrow mountain pass. Supplies ran low. Morale flagged under blistering sun and constant skirmish assaults. When the Usuji reserve, rallied by loyal daimyo, charged with pikes and naginata, the Takeda line faltered. In moments, panic and rout followed. Yoshinobu fought valiantly, but his host collapsed around him. News of this calamity reached Kofu like a death knell. Lady Sanjō, awaiting her son's return, lit all the lanterns in the pavilion, one for each year of his life, as prayers for his safe homecoming. Hours passed, then days, with no word. At last, battered horsemen arrived bearing a single dispatch scroll. Yoshinobu had fallen in battle, leaving no heir. The dagger of grief struck Lady Sanjō with bone-shattering force. First came disbelief. She could not comprehend life without the son she had borne, the lord she had nurtured. Then came dread. Without Yoshinobu, the clan's succession was broken. In her hands, she held the last vestige of the tiger's line. She summoned Katsuyori, now 20, from his quiet studies at Takeda. She dressed him in his brother's armor. Kenshin's widow had sent it in final token of respect, and sat him upon the carved oak throne of the regent. In a voice trembling yet resolute, she proclaimed him heir. Out of ashes, the crane once guided the tiger's roar. Now, from the final ember of that roar, a new flame must rise. My son, bear this burden with courage, and let mercy mark your reign. Katsuyori, unschooled in the delicate balance of statecraft that had defined his mother's life, accepted, fear and determination mingling in his eyes. Underscore 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 underscore. Under Katsuyori's command, the Takeda clan lingered for only a few more years. The Battle of Nagashino's catastrophe still weighed heavy. Their warriors, once unmatched in cavalry, now struggled against combinations of matchlocks and pikemen. Oda Nobunaga seized the moment in 1582, dispatching a massive force through Shinano and Kozuke. Katsuyori, guided by Lady Sanjō's final counsel to hold defensible positions, entrenched at Takeda Castle, but was quickly overwhelmed by superior numbers. As dawn broke on March 11, 1582, Takeda's walls were breached. Seeing defeat inevitable, Katsuyori rode to his beloved mother's temple. There, beneath blooming wisteria, he found Lady Sanjō, a frail figure in white, her hair streaked with silver. "My mother," he whispered, voice raw. "The world I vow to protect is lost." She reached to steady him, the mantle of matriarch heavy on her shoulders. "My son," she replied, "the crane's flight may end, but its wings return to heaven." Together they ascended the temple steps to the inner sanctum. There, as samurai of other clans swarmed the grounds, Lady Sanjō performed one final rite, a sutra recitation for the souls of the Takeda, from Shingen and Yoshinobu to those who fell at Nagashino and Nagashino's end. As incense curled to the rafters, she placed her hands upon Katsuyori's head. In the hush that followed, Katsuyori made his choice. Drawing the sword his mother had once gifted him, he performed the ritual of Junshur, following his father and brother into death. His body fell across the altar, katana's blade echoing in the stillness. Lady Sanjō knelt beside him, her robes brushed with his blood. Tears streamed down her face, but her soul remained unbroken. She cradled his head, whispering, "The crane soars beyond the storm, into the light no mortal sees. May your spirit find such sky, and rest in endless peace." With that final prayer, the clan of Takeda lay dissolved. Oda's forces claimed Kai province. But in the hearts of villagers, merchants, and priests alike, the memory of the crane and the tiger endured. In the years that followed, Lady Sanjō lived in quiet seclusion at the temple she had founded. Though bereft of family and worldly power, she devoted her days to tending the shrine gardens, teaching local children calligraphy and poetry and caring for the temple's humble infirmary. Pilgrims came from distant provinces to pay respects to the regent who had governed with both sword and compassion. On a crisp autumn morning in 1591, Lady Sanjō passed from this world. In the sanctified garden, beneath a canopy of maple leaves turned flame-red, her attendants found her peacefully seated before the incense altar. Her final poem inscribed on a scroll beside her. "A lone crane upon the mountain's crest bids dawn farewell with quiet grace. Though winds may howl and rivers swell, its spirit soars to endless space." Her funeral rites, attended by monks and villagers alike, combined the solemnity of samurai procession with the simplicity of rural remembrance. When her ashes were committed to the temple's reliquary, priests chanted sutras that blended Buddhist compassion with Shinto reverence, an echo of the dual worlds she had bridged in life. Though the Takeda clan's banners faded from Japan's political landscape, the legend of Lady Sanjō endured. In whispered tales by hearthsides, she remained the crane of Kyoto, the noblewoman who had woven silk and strategy into a legacy that balanced martial might with mercy. And in the temple's autumn winds, it was said, one could still hear the soft rustle of crane feathers and the distant roar of a tiger remembered. The chill of early spring in 1582 carried with it an unspoken dread. For nearly a decade, Lady Sanjō had watched over Kai from her temple retreat, tending to monks and villagers. Even as Takeda Katsuyori, her youngest and final scion, struggled to hold the realm she had built. Yet when news came that Oda Nobunaga's armies, fresh from their triumphs elsewhere, were pouring south through Shinano, the regent felt the old resolve stir within her. Though age had silvered her hair and sapped her strength, her spirit flared one last time. Summoning Katsuyori to the temple's moss-lined courtyard, she laid before him the war fan that had passed from Shingen to Yoshinobu and now to him. The lacquered surface, still bright beneath its patina of countless campaigns, caught the morning light as she spoke. Your father and brother carried this into the fiercest storms. Yet they fell by weapons new to their age. Now Oda advances with the same thunder. You must choose, cling to legacy, or let it guide you to a wiser path. Katsuyori clutched the fan, eyes dark with fear and defiance. He had inherited his brother's hunger for conquest more than his mother's counsel. Mother, he said, voice cracking, the tiger must roar once more. I will meet Oda in open field and reclaim our honor or die. Lady Sanjō closed her eyes, sorrow and love warring in her heart. Then know this, a roar without caution brings ruin. Let us at least buy time for our people. In her final act of regency, she orchestrated the evacuation of temple villages to hidden mountain valleys and dispatched secret messengers to both Hojo and Yasuji, begging a reprieve or even a diversion through diplomatic channels. But Katsuyori, swept by ambition and the memory of Nagashino's failure, chose to stand at Takato Castle, a stone bulwark ill-suited to withstand an Oda siege. He refused her counsel to deploy guerrilla tactics in the mountains, insisting on the honor of face-to-face combat. With a heavy heart, Lady Sanjō retreated to the temple's inner sanctuary, resigning herself to prayer as the drums of Oda's advance thundered nearer. In late February, Oda's generals encircled Takato. When the assault came, led by Tori Saneman and Asano Nagamasa, it was swift and merciless. Walls once thought impregnable crumbled beneath coordinated volleys of arquebus fire and sapping engines. Night fell on the massacre of defenders, dawn revealed the castle aflame and the southern passes opened to the enemy. Lady Sanjō emerged from her shrine to see refugee columns winding through cedar groves, families clutching bundles of kimono, monks leading the infirm, children's tears mingling with the morning mist. She set to work organizing relief. Rice from her concealed granaries, cloth from her last reserves, and shelter in mountain caves she had prepared years before. Even as Oda's soldiers scoured the valleys, she moved among the frightened, her presence a calm harbor amid chaos. Across Kai, the tiger's roar had fallen silent. Oda's banners snapped above every stronghold, and loyal samurai who stayed behind were either slain or compelled into service. Katsuyori escaped north with a handful of retainers, pursuing the hope of regrouping, but his heart faltered as he watched the land he swore to defend become a tapestry of red and white banners. In May, Oda Nobunaga summoned Lady Sanjō to his command post at Kasuoka. Cloaked in white robes that spoke of both mourning and purity, she presented herself without guard. Nobunaga, intrigued by the legend of the Crane Regent, received her with rare courtesy. He offered her a place in his court and honored hostage, he claimed, to ensure the peaceable submission of the former Takeda lands. Lady Sanjo, dignified and unbowed, declined. "I served the tiger with sword and silk alike," she replied. "And now I serve the people of Kai with what remains of my life. My only seat is beneath the pines in the shadow of my temple." Nobunaga, noting both her strength and her sorrow, granted her one concession, the right to return unmolested to Takeda era where she could live out her days in peace. Thus spared further indignity, she returned to her mountain home, bearing the weight of her fallen clan. In the final years, she devoted herself wholly to compassion, feeding orphans of fallen samurai, tending to wounded villagers, and preserving what she could of the Takeda archives. Scrolls of poetry, strategy, and the fragile treaties she had written with her own hand. Pilgrims came to venerate her as the Crane of Kyoto, whose graceful counsel had once given life to a tiger's roar. On a clear autumn dawn in 1591, as red maple leaves drifted like embers through the temple gates, Lady Sanjo felt her own spirit ebb. Surrounded by her attendants and the faithful monks, she penned one last poem. The mountain wind steals autumn's flame. Petals drift where they once shone. Yet memory holds the song of cranes, and honors those whose wings have flown. With that final verse, she laid down her brush. Her attendants found her later, seated before the incense altar, breath stilled as if in peaceful slumber. Word of her passing rippled outward, carried by monks and merchants into every corner of Kai and beyond. At her funeral, samurai in simple robes bore her coffin to the temple's highest terrace. There, beneath a sky of softly falling leaves, they chanted sutras that mingled Buddhist compassion with the ancient prayers of the Fujiwara lineage. When her ashes were laid to rest alongside those of her husband and sons, a single crane-shaped lantern was cast upon the mountain stream, a silent beacon of her enduring spirit. Though the Takeda clan had fallen, the legacy of Lady Sanjo lived on in the hearts of peasants who remembered her kindness, in the stone bridges she had built, and in the legends whispered by bamboo groves of a noblewoman who bridged courts and castles, whose counsel tempered conquest and whose compassion outsoared the roar of any tiger. In that final illumination, the crane and the tiger, woven together by fate and devotion, found their immortality.